Hello everyone, and welcome to the DxD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was the immortal dragon slayer who entered the Holy Grail. L War Issei x Medusa x Rias Gremory, Fate Stay Night x DxD. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Dragon's Convergence. The air in Fuyuki City tasted wrong. Issei Hyodo paused atop the skyscraper, his enhanced senses cataloging the unnatural convergence of magicka. L signatures that shouldn't coexist in the same reality. Moonlight glinted off his dark crimson battle gear, not armor precisely, but a semi-rigid material of his own design that adapted to his movements like a second skin. The soft crimson glow emanating from the back of his left hand pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You feel it too, don't you, D-Drag?" he murmured, flexing his fingers as dragon-shaped sigil on his hand brightened momentarily. Open double angle bracket. The boundaries grow thinner with each passing hour. Partner, close double angle bracket, rumbled the ancient consciousness that had shared his existence for 13 years now. Open double angle bracket. This convergence is unlike any I've witnessed in millennia. Magics that should never touch are bleeding into one another. Close double angle bracket. Issei closed his eyes, extending his senses outward. The city bell. Ao was a tapestry of conflicting energies. The structured thaumaturgy of mages, the divine resonance of heroic spirits, the distinctive signatures of devils, fallen angels, and yokai, and beneath it all, the unmistakable presence of dragon kind. None of these forces should exist in the same dimensional plane, yet here they were, colliding in a city that seemed to exist at the intersection of incompatible realities. "We knew the Holy Grail War would be the catalyst," Issei said, opening his eyes to reveal slitted pupils glowing with internal fire. "But I didn't expect the deterioration to progress this rapidly." The dimensional abnormalities had begun manifesting 3 months ago, subtle at first, just enough for someone with his unique perception to notice. Ancient barriers between worlds were weakening, allowing bleed-through of energies that should remain separated. When D-Drag identified Fuyuki City as the epicenter, Issei had immediately recognized the significance: the Holy Grail War. A ritual designed to punch a hole through dimensional barriers and access the root of all existence. Except this time, something was different. Something was wrong. A sudden explosion of magic. Al energy from the Riverside district interrupted his thoughts. 2 distinct power signatures clashed violently, heroic spirits engaged in combat. Normally, Issei would have let the Grail War participants settle their own conflicts. But the unstable dimensional resonance surrounding this particular battle demanded his attention. "Time to introduce ourselves," he said, rolling his shoulders as translucent crimson wings materialized from his back. Not physical wings, but crystallized dragon energy that allowed him to traverse vast distances in moments. With a single powerful thrust, Issei launched himself from the skyscraper. His form briefly illuminated by the city lights below before he accelerated beyond human perception. Medusa had known from the moment of her summoning that this Holy Grail War would be unlike any other. The rider-class servant moved with supernatural grace, her chain daggers slicing through the air as she narrowly avoided another barrage of projected weapons from her opponent. Archer, she hadn't yet identified which heroic spirit wore that mantle, maintained his distance atop a nearby building, raining down steel with mechanical precision. "Your master lacks the courage to show himself," Archer called out, his voice carrying despite the distance. "A pity. I'd hoped to end 2 threats with 1 battle." Medusa didn't waste breath responding. Her master, Shinji Medu, was indeed absent, not from cowardice as Archer implied, but because she had deliberately left him behind. Something was wrong with this war, wrong with the very fabric of reality in Fuyuki. The magical energy sustaining her existence felt contaminated, as if foreign elements had been introduced to the summoning system. She needed answers before dragging her technically master deeper into this abnormal conflict. A new barrage of projected swords forced her into a defensive spiral, her enhanced agility allowing her to dodge most while deflecting others with her chain daggers. But Archer was hurting her. She realized too late, backing her toward the river where her mobility would be compromised. As she prepared to risk a direct assault despite the disadvantage, both combatants froze at the sudden intrusion of a third power signature, one that registered to their supernatural senses as neither servant nor master, yet possessed energy that dwarfed most magi. A figure descended from above, landing between them with enough force to crack the concrete beneath his feet. The newcomer straightened slowly, revealing a young man in his mid-20s with chestnut hair and unasu eyes that shifted between warm brown and draconic amber. His clothing resembled combat gear but incorporated elements that Medusa couldn't place within any historical period she recognized. "You're disrupting an already unstable convergence point," the stranger said, his voice carrying authority that belied his apparent age. "I recommend you both stand down before you tear a hole in reality neither of your masters can repair." Archer's response was predictably direct, a fusillade of projected weapons launched with killing intent. The stranger didn't dodge. Instead, his left hand flashed WITH crimson light as he made a sweeping gesture. The incoming projectile slowed visibly, as if moving through heavy liquid, before dropping harmlessly to the ground. Time manipulation, Archer observed from his perch, curiosity briefly overriding hostility. "You're no ordinary magus." "I'm no magus at all," the stranger replied, and Medusa noticed how he stood carefully balanced, presenting neutral body language to both servants while remaining ready to move in any direction. A warrior's stance, perfected through experience. Medusa circled cautiously, her concealed eyes studying the newcomer through her mystic blindfold. His magical signature was unlike anything she'd encountered, part human, part something ancient and terrifyingly powerful. "You possess a dragon's essence," she stated, her daggers still ready. "Yet you appear human." The stranger turned slightly toward her, and Medusa tensed at the flash of recognition in his eyes. He knew her, or at least, knew what she was. "I'm Issei Hyodo," he said simply. "And yes, I carry dragon essence, among other things. I'm here because the dimensional walls are failing, and your battle is accelerating the deterioration." "This doesn't concern you," Archer called down, though he had notably ceased his attack. "The Holy Grail War has rules. Rules that assumed a single, stable reality," Issei interrupted. "Look around you, Archer. Really look." Despite herself, Medusa extended her senses as directed. What she felt sent a chill through her immortal essence. The fabric of space around them seemed to shimmer with overlapping dimensional frequencies. In certain spots, she could perceive ghostly outlines of buildings that didn't exist, people that weren't there, and magical energy patterns from some other system entirely. "What is this?" she demanded, the first traces of genuine unease entering her voice. "Convergence," Issei answered grimly. "Multiple realities bleeding into one another. Your Holy Grail ritual was always designed to punch through dimensional barriers, but something's interfering this time. Each battle between servants weakens the boundaries further." Before either servant could respond, the air between them distorted visibly. A tear appeared, not a physical rent, but a warping of visual space that revealed swirling energies beyond. From this dimensional wound emerged three figures that defied classification in the Grail War system. They resembled humans with black, feathered wings extending from their backs. Their hands glowed with spears of light energy fundamentally different from a servant's magical composition. Their eyes widened upon seeing the three figures already present. "Dragon energy," hissed the apparent leader, a middle-aged man in elaborate dark robes. "Impossible. This territory was supposed to be unclaimed." Medusa shifted position, suddenly finding herself potentially allied with Archer and the stranger against these new threats. The fallen angels, for she somehow knew that's what they were. Despite never having encountered such beings, were eyeing Issei with particular hostility. "Fallen angels in Fuyuki," Issei muttered, his stance shifting subtly into something more aggressive. "The convergence is accelerating faster than I anticipated." What followed happened too quickly for an ordinary human to perceive. The lead fallen angel launched a light spear directly at Issei's heart. Simultaneously, Archer released a new barrage of projected weapons toward both Issei and the fallen angels, apparently deciding that all were threats to be eliminated. Medusa herself moved toward the nearest fallen angel, her chain daggers whirling. Issei's response demonstrated why Medusa had sensed such power in him. The crimson sigil on his left hand flared brilliantly as he called out. "Boosted gear. Release constraint level 3. A partial gauntlet of red dragon-scaled armor materialized over his left arm, extending to his elbow and emitting a pulse. of energy that momentarily distorted the air around him. With his armored hand, he caught the light spear inches from his chest, the energy sizzling against his gauntlet but failing to penetrate. His right hand extended toward Archer's incoming barrage, and again time seemed to distort around the projectiles, slowing them to a crawl. "Dragon Slayer!" screamed the fallen angel leader, his face contorted with sudden fear. "Retreat! He's a..." The warning came too late for his companions. Medusa had already engaged one, her supernatural speed allowing her to wrap her chain around the fallen angel's neck before he could react. Simultaneously, Issei had closed the distance to the third angel with impossible speed, his armored left hand clamping around the angel's throat. "You're a long way from your reality," Issei said, his voice eerily calm despite the battle raging around him. "I need information more than I need your death. Tell me who sent you through the convergence point, and I'll let you return to your dimension intact." Quote, the fallen angel gurgled, light spear dissipating as he clawed at Issei's armored grip. "The orders came from Kokobile," he said. "Sacred gear users, new territory." Archer had ceased his attack, instead observing the confrontation with analytical intensity. Medusa maintained her hold on the second fallen angel but was equally focused on Issei's interrogation. "Kokobile is sending scouts through dimensional tiers," Issei summarized, his eyes momentarily flashing with draconic light. "Ambitious even for a fallen angel cadre member." He released his captive with a dismissive gesture. "Tell your master that this convergence isn't an opportunity, it's an existential threat to all realities involved. Further incursions will be met with permanent solutions." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The fallen angel scrambled away, his wings unfurling as he prepared to flee. Medusa, after a moment's hesitation, similarly released her captive. The leader, seeing his companions freed, backed away warily. "This isn't over, Dragon Slayer," he spat, though fear undermined his attempted bravado. "Kokobile won't abandon such power." "I didn't say he should abandon it," Issei interrupted coldly. "I said he should fear it. There's a difference." The dimensional tear through which the fallen angels had appeared remained visible, its edges pulsing with unstable energy. The three retreated through it, vanishing from this reality. The tear itself, however, didn't close completely, instead shrinking to a pinpoint of distorted space that continued to hover in midair. "The boundaries aren't healing," Archer observed, finally descending from his perch to ground level, though he maintained a cautious distance. "Your intervention seems to have caused more problems than it solved." Quote, "The tears weren't going to heal anyway," Issei responded, the partial gauntlet on his arm fading back into the sigil on his hand. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. This Holy Grail war is occurring during a dimensional convergence event. Every use of servant-class magic widens the existing tiers and potentially creates new ones." Medusa approached cautiously, her mystic blindfold concealing eyes that studied the newcomer with intense focus. "You speak as if you understand both our ritual and these fallen angels. You exist outside both systems, yet know their rules." Her voice carried centuries of suspicion born from betrayal. "What exactly are you, Dragon Slayer?" Issei met her concealed gaze without flinching, one of the few beings Ho could look at Medusa directly without fear, even if he couldn't see her eyes through the blindfold. "I told you, I'm Issei Hyodo. As for what I am..." He glanced at the still visible pinpoint of dimensional distortion. "That's complicated. But right now, I'm the only one trying to prevent multiple realities from collapsing into each other." Archer's bow had not disappeared, though it was no longer aimed directly at either of them. "You expect us to simply abandon the Holy Grail war based on your warnings. I expect you to recognize an existential threat when you see one," Issei countered. "The Holy Grail itself is becoming contaminated by energies from other dimensions. Whatever wish you or your masters might make would be filtered through a corrupted system." Before either servant could respond, multiple new pinpoints of dimensional distortion appeared throughout the area, tiny tears in reality that pulsed with unstable energy. From several of these emerged ghostly images, MPSES of beings and locations from other realities, visible for moments before fading. Medusa saw something that made her inhale sharply, a massive school building that seemed to float impossibly in midair. Surrounded by an otherworldly forest, the architecture was unlike anything in her extensive knowledge of human civilization. "Huo Academy," Issei identified, following her gaze to the ghostly image before it faded. From my original reality. The convergence is getting worse. We're seeing echoes now, places and people bleeding through momentarily. Your original reality. Archer seized on the phrasing. You're a dimensional traveler then, not just aware of the multiple worlds. Issei's expression darkened. Not by choice. My circumstances are unique. A sudden pulse of energy from the riverside drew their attention. Another battle had erupted between servants, different ones this time, judging by the magical signatures. The dimensional distortions around them pulsed in synchronization with the distant clash of powers. Every servant battle accelerates the convergence, Issei said grimly. At this rate, we have perhaps 3 days before a catastrophic collapse of dimensional boundaries. Medusa studied him carefully, centuries of existence making her adept at detecting deception. She found none in him, only grim certainty and something deeper, a pain that suggested personal knowledge of what such a collapse might mean. You've seen this before, she realized aloud. This isn't theoretical knowledge. Issei's eyes met hers again, and for a moment, Medusa glimpsed something ancient and wounded behind his human appearance, a trauma that resonated with her own tragic past. 13 years ago, he confirmed quietly, I watched my entire hometown disappear into a dimensional collapse. I was the only survivor, and that was an accident of circumstance rather than skill. The raw honesty in his voice struck something in Medusa that she'd thought long buried. Despite herself, she found she believed him. Archer's expression suggested he'd reached a similar conclusion, though his natural suspicion remained evident. What do you propose? Archer asked, pragmatic despite his skepticism. The Holy Grail War cannot simply be cancelled once begun. Not cancelled, Issei agreed, but modified. The Grail itself might actually be our solution. Its function is to access dimensional barriers and reach the root. If properly redirected, that same power could potentially stabilize the convergence. Another distant explosion rocked the area, accompanied by a visible wave of distortion that rippled through the air around them. The pinpoints of dimensional tears briefly widened before contracting again, leaving behind more ghostly images, this time of armor-clad angels with multiple wings. Observing them with evident confusion before fading from view. Heaven's reconnaissance, Issei identified. The other dimensions are becoming aware of the breaches. He turned to the two servants with renewed urgency. We need to establish a temporary truce among all participants in the Grail War. Without cooperation, none of our realities will survive what's coming. Archer's expression remained skeptical. And how do you propose to convince masters who have prepared their entire lives for this opportunity to suddenly cooperate with their enemies? By showing them exactly what's at stake, Issei replied, reaching into a pocket dimension that briefly distorted the air around his hand. From this impossible space, he withdrew a crystalline object the size of Hi's palm, a multifaceted gem that pulsed with contained energy. This is a dimensional anchor from my reality. It contains a recording of the last convergence event I witnessed. Medusa took an involuntary step closer, drawn by the artifact's unusual energy signature. A memory crystal, something like that, Issei confirmed. Though it captures objective reality rather than subjective memory. He held the crystal between them. Before you decide whether to trust me, you should see what we're facing. The crystal flared to life at his touch, projecting a 3-dimensional scene into the air between them. The images were horrifyingly clear, a small town being literally unmade as dimensional barriers collapsed, buildings and people fragmenting into constituent particles as overlapping realities tried to occupy the same space. The laws of physics themselves seemed to break down, gravity and time functioning erratically as the destruction progressed. Most disturbing was the imagery of Opal caught in the convergence, their bodies distorting as they partially existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their screams cutting off as their very essence was distributed across incompatible realities. At the center of this apocalyptic scene stood a much younger Issei, perhaps 12 years old, his body partially engulfed in crimson dragon energy as he screamed in evident agony. The recording showed this younger Issei's body absorbing massive amounts of dimensional energy, his human form briefly giving way to something draconic before stabilizing into a hybrid state. The recording ended abruptly, leaving all three standing in silence. Even Archer's typically impassive expression showed traces of genuine concern. That was Kuo Town, 13 years ago, Issei said quietly. Population 87,000. I was the only survivor, and that was because D-Drake's essence merged with mine at the moment of convergence, allowing me to exist across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. D-Drake, Medusa questioned. Open double angle bracket IAMDDRAIG, the Red Dragon Emperor, close double angle bracket came a rumbling voice that seemed to emanate from the sigil on Issei's hand. Open double angle bracket one of the heavenly dragons sealed by the biblical god millennia ago. My essence now coexists with my partner's, granting him abilities beyond normal human limitations. Close double angle bracket. Archer's expression hardened with recognition. A dragon of apocalyptic power, if the legends are accurate. You expect us to trust someone hosting such an entity. I expect you to recognize that I've spent 13 years preventing another convergence disaster, Issei countered. D-Drake's power is the only reason I can perceive dimensional tears before they become catastrophic. Without him, I wouldn't be able to help at all. Another ripple of dimensional instability washed over them, stronger than before. The ghostly images this time remained longer, a towering Western-style mansion superimposed over Fuyuki's modern architecture, crimson energy suffusing its structure. The Gremory estate, Issei identified, his expression darkening. From the underworld dimension, devils are becoming involved now. Devils, Archer repeated flatly. Biblical devils are real in your dimension. As real as heroic spirits are in yours, Issei confirmed. And equally powerful in their own way. If they start actively crossing over rather than just observing. He left the implication hanging. Medusa had remained silent, processing what she'd witnessed in the recording. As a being who had suffered divine punishment and transformation herself, something about Issei's evident trauma resonated with her own experiences. The boy in that recording had lost everything, his very humanity compromised in the process of survival. What happened after? She found herself asking. After you survived. Issei's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Medusa felt as if he could see through her blindfold to the monstrous eyes beneath, not with fear, but with understanding. I spent 2 years learning to control D-Drake's power, he answered honestly. Then another 5 tracking down dimensional anomalies and preventing minor convergences. Eventually, I discovered that my unique condition allows me to absorb abilities from dragons I defeat. Their essence becomes part of mine, making me stronger. The time manipulation you witnessed came from a temporal drake I defeated 3 years ago. You became a dragon slayer out of necessity, Medusa observed, to gain the power needed to prevent another disaster. Issei nodded once, a gesture that conveyed volumes about the harsh choices that had shaped him. The first dragon I fought nearly killed me. Each victory made the next battle more survivable. Eventually, I gained enough power to actually close smaller dimensional tiers rather than just containing them. Another explosion from the distant servant battle sent a stronger wave of dimensional distortion washing over them. This time, the ghostly images didn't fade completely. The outlines of Kuo Academy remained visible, superimposed over Fuyuki's architecture in a physically impossible overlap that hurt the eyes to observe directly. We're running out of time, Issei said grimly. The convergence is accelerating exponentially now. Those other servants need to stop fighting immediately. Archer's bow had finally disappeared, a tacit acknowledgement that Issei's warning demanded attention. My master will need convincing. Rin Tasaka doesn't abandon her objectives easily. Nor does Shinji Meitu, Medusa added, though with considerably less conviction. Her nominal master was not someone whose judgment she particularly respected. Then let me speak with them, Issei proposed. All the masters and servants together. One meeting to explain the situation. And propose a temporary alliance until the dimensional crisis is resolved. And afterward, Archer pressed, assuming we succeed in stabilizing the barriers. Then you can resume your war for the Grail. Issei said with a shrug that didn't quite hide his distaste for the idea. Though I'd hoped the experience might suggest better uses for such power. Before either servant could respond, a new presence made itself known, a ripple of distinctive magical energy that even Issei seemed surprised to detect. All 3 turned toward the source, a rooftop several buildings away, where a female figure stood observing them. Even at this distance, her crimson hair was unmistakable, flowing in the night breeze like living flame. A devil, Issei breathed, recognition and something more complex crossing his features. But not just any devil. That's Rias Gremory. The name clearly meant nothing to Archer or Medusa, but Issei's reaction suggested significant history. The woman, Rias, made no move to approach or retreat, simply continuing her observation with evident interest. You know her, Medusa stated rather than asked. In my original reality, yes, Issei confirmed, his expression unreadable. Though we've never met in this timeline. The fact that she's here, watching rather than intervening. He trailed off, his tactical mind visibly processing implications. The Gremory clan must be aware of the convergence already. They're investigating rather than merely reacting. Archer's eyes narrowed. Another complication we don't need. Are potentially our greatest ally, Issei countered. The Gremory family possesses some of the most comprehensive magical research resources in the devil world. If anyone might have historical records of previous convergence events, it would be them. As if aware of their discussion, Rias Gremory chose that moment to depart, stepping backward into a magic circle that flared with crimson energy before both she and the circle vanished from sight. Teleportation magic, Archer observed. Convenient. She'll be back, Issei said with certainty. The question is whether she'll come as an ally or an observer. He refocused on the immediate problem. But first, we need to stop that servant battle before it tears open a full breach. Medusa and Archer exchanged glances, a momentary acknowledgement of shared purpose despite their status as enemies in the Grail War. The threat Issei had revealed transcended their individual conflicts. I will speak with my master, Archer finally said. Rin is pragmatic enough to recognize an existential threat when presented with evidence. Quote, as will I, Medusa agreed, though with noticeable reservation. Though Shinji may prove difficult. Issei nodded, relief briefly visible in his expressio. Before determination reasserted itself. We should move quickly. I'll approach the other active servants and request they cease hostilities until we can gather all participants. As they prepared to separate, Medusa found herself studying Issei with renewed interest. Despite his evident power, he carried himself without arrogance, a quality rare in beings of significant strength. His experiences had clearly shaped him into someone who understood suffering intimately yet retained compassion despite it. In some ways, his journey mirrored her own transformation from divine being to monster, though. He seemed to have integrated his dual nature more successfully than she ever had. Dragon Slayer, she said, causing him to pause as he prepared to depart. Your eyes, they see through deception, don't they? Through illusions and barriers. Issei turned back to her, momentary surprise giving way to understanding. Dragon Sight, he confirmed. An ability I gained from defeating the Mirage Drake of the Northern Wastes. It lets me perceive true forms beneath disguises or transformations. The implication hung between them. He could likely see her true nature despite the blindfold that contained her petrifying gaze. Then you know what I am, she stated flatly. I know what you became, he corrected gently. Not by choice, but by divine cruelty. Just as I know what you were before, and what you might be again. The response left Medusa momentarily speechless, not just for its acceptance of her monstrous nature, but for the implication that he saw possibility where she had long ago accepted inevitability. Before she could formulate a response, Issei had already launched himself skyward, crimson energy wings carrying him toward the distant battle with supernatural speed. Archer moved to depart as well, but paused beside Medusa, an unusual individual, he observed neutrally. Powerful enough to be dangerous, damaged enough to be unpredictable. Yet genuine in his concern, Medusa found herself adding. Few beings with such power retain such humanity. Perhaps, Archer conceded, but remember that even the most well-intentioned beings can cause devastation when operating from incomplete understanding. Trust cautiously, Rider. With that warning, Archer dematerialized into spirit form, leaving Medusa alone with her thoughts. She gazed at the dimensional distort. Ions still visible throughout the area, the ghostly overlap of realities that shouldn't coexist. Then her attention returned to the direction Issei had departed, her enhanced senses still able to detect. His unique energy signature despite the distance. A dragon slayer who retained compassion for monsters. An immortal who fought to protect mortal lives. A human who carried the essence of one of the most destructive entities in mythology. Yet used that power to prevent destruction. Issei Hyodo was a contradiction in every sense, and Medusa, who had existed as both divine beauty and monstrous horror, found herself intrigued by such contradictions in a way she hadn't experienced in centuries. With a final glance at the distorted reality around her, she too departed, moving to find her Nomen. Al master and convince him of threats far beyond his limited comprehension. 13 years earlier, Kuo Town 12-year-old Issei Hyodo ran through the dissolving streets of his hometown, terror lending speed to his small legs. Around him, reality itself was coming apart, buildings flickering between existence and non-existence, people screaming as their bodies distorted in physically impossible ways before disappearing entirely. "Mom! Dad!" he screamed, changing direction toward his house as the school behind him began to fragment into particles of light. His classmates' screams cut off abruptly as the building and everyone inside it simply ceased to exist. The sky above had split open, revealing swirling vortices of color that shouldn't exist in nature. From these tears in reality emerged occasional glimpses of other worlds, landscapes and creatures that had no place in human understanding. Most terrifying were the dragons, massive serpentine forms that circled the dimensional tiers, their roars echoing across what remained of Kuo Town. Issei stumbled as the ground beneath him rippled like water, gravity briefly inverting to send him floating upward before reasserting itself and slamming him back down. Blood trickled from his nose and ears as the incompatible physics of overlapping realities stressed his human body beyond its limits. "Someone help!" he screamed, knowing even as he did that no help would come. The adult authorities were as helpless as children in the face of reality's dissolution. Open double angle bracket interesting. A human child with latent potential. Close double angle bracket. The ice seemed to come from inside Issei's own head, deep, ancient, and distinctly inhuman. He froze, looking wildly around for the source. Open double angle bracket up here, young one. Close double angle bracket. Issei's gaze lifted to one of the largest tiers in the sky, where a massive red dragon hovered, its scales gleaming like rubies in the chaotic light of the convergence. Unlike the other draconic forms, this one seemed to be observing within intelligence rather than merely reacting to the dimensional chaos. Are you doing this?" Issei demanded, fear momentarily overwhelmed by desperate anger. "Are you destroying my town?" The dragon's laughter rumbled through Issei's mind. Open double angle bracket. "No, child. This convergence is beyond even my power to create. I am merely drawn to its energy, as are many of my kind. Dragons exist partially beyond Dimensio. NAL constraints. We can survive what your species cannot." Close double angle bracket. Around them, the destruction accelerated. Entire city blocks vanished in cascading waves of unmaking. Issei could see his own house in the distance beginning to distort, the structure stretching impossibly before starting to fragment. "My parents are in there," he screamed, resuming his desperate run despite the increasingly unstable ground. "I have to save them." Open double angle bracket. "They are already gone, child." Close double angle bracket. The dragon's voice informed him with dispassionate certainty. Open double angle bracket. "Their physical forms have been distributed across 17 different dimensional frequencies. What you see is merely the echo of what existed moments ago." Close double angle bracket. Grief and rage exploded within Issei's young heart. "Bring them back," he demanded, tears streaming down his face as he stared up at the massive dragon. "You're so powerful. Bring them back." Open double angle bracket. "I cannot." "But." Close double angle bracket. The dragon seemed to consider something. Open double angle bracket. "Perhaps I can save you, interesting one. Your soul has unusual ONANCE, compatible with draconic essence in a way I haven't observed in millennia." Close double angle bracket. Issei barely registered the words, his focus still on his disintegrating home. He began running again, determined to reach his parents even if it meant his own destruction. The dragon's massive form descended through the dimensional tear, approaching Issei with surprising grace despite its enormous size. Open double angle bracket. "Foolish but brave. Worthy qualities in a potential host." Close double angle bracket. A claw the size of a car reached toward Issei, glowing with crimson energy. The boy didn't stop running, didn't even glance back at the approaching dragon. His entire world had narrowed to the rapidly dissolving house just 100 meters away. Open double angle bracket IAMDDRAIG, the Red Dragon Emperor, close double angle bracket the voice proclaimed in his mind. Open double angle bracket and I choose you, Issei Hyodo, as my vessel in this convergence of realities. Close double angle bracket. The dragon's claw touched Issei's back just as he reached what remained of his front yard. Crimson energy engulfed him instantly, and pain beyond anything he had ever imagined tore through his small body. It felt as if he were being unmade and reconstructed simultaneously, his very DNA rewritten by the draconic essence pouring into him. Through the haze of agony, Issei saw his house complete its dissolution, his parents visible through the front window for one final moment before they, along with the entire structure, fragmented into particles and disappeared. His scream of loss mingled with the roar of the dragon as both beings, human and dragon, found themselves caught in the final collapse of dimensional barriers. Light exploded outward, engulfing Kuo town entirely. When it faded, nothing remained of the once thriving community except a perfectly circular crater 10 kilometers in diameter. At its center lay a single unconscious Orm, a young boy whose left hand now bore a glowing crimson sigil in the shape of a dragon. Issei Hyodo, the sole survivor of Kuo town, forever changed by the convergence that had claimed everything and everyone he had ever known. Present day, Fuyuki City _ From her vantage point atop one of Fuyuki's tallest buildings, Rias Gremory observed the interaction between Issei Hyodo and the two servants with intense interest. Her research division had detected the dimensional anomalies 3 weeks ago, but the appearance of the dragon-merged one was an unexpected development, one that both complicated her mission and potentially offered new avenues for resolution. The records were accurate, she murmured, pushing a strand of crimson hair from her face as she studied the departing fig. Ewer of Issei through a magical enhancement circle. He survived the Kuo town convergence and gained control of Ddrake's power. Behind her, a magic circle flared briefly as another devil teleported to her location. Akano Himahima, Rias's queen and closest confidant, materialized from the circle, her traditional Miko attire contrasting sharply with her distinctly non-traditional beauty. The Reconnaissance units report 17 new dimensional tiers in the Eastern District alone, Akano reported, her normally playful demeanor subdued by the gravity of their situation. The rate of deterioration is accelerating. Just as the ancient texts predicted. Rias nodded, her expression somber as she continued watching Issei's distant form. And our barriers, holding for now, but straining against the dimensional pressure. Sears X Sama estimates we have perhaps 72 hours before even devil magic can no longer maintain stability within our observation zones. Then we have no choice but to intervene directly. Rias decided, turning away from the edge of the building. The Holy Grail War has catalyzed a convergence event exactly as the Gremory archives warned might happen if ritual occurred during the celestial alignment. Akano's eyes widened slightly. You mean to approach them openly? The Underworld Council specifically ordered observation only. The Council isn't here witnessing reality literally coming apart, Rias interrupted with uncharacteristic sharpness. And they don't have access to the complete Gremory archives regarding the previous convergence events. Her expression softened as she noted Akano's concerned look. I'm sorry, old friend. The strain of watching this unfold knowing what's coming has me on edge. Understandable, Akano acknowledged with a small smile. Though I must admit, your interest in the dragon-merged one seems to extend beyond mere strategic consideration. A faint blush colored Rias's cheeks, though her dignified bearing never faltered. Issei Hyodo is potentially the linchpin in preventing catastrophic dimensional collapse. The Gremory archives are clear, his unique existence as a human-dragon hybrid allows him to perceive and potentially manipulate dimensional boundaries in ways neither devils nor angels can match. And the fact that he's rather handsome for a human has nothing to do with your intense observation. Akano teased, some of her usual playfulness returning despite the dire circumstances. Akano, Rias admonished, though without real heat. This is hardly the time. On the contrary, her queen countered. If we face potential dimensional annihilation, when better to appreciate attractive specimens from other realities? Despite herself, Rias smiled. Akano's ability to find levity even in apocalyptic circumstances was one of her most valuable qualities as both queen and friend. Gather the research team, Rias instructed, her expression returning to serious determination. Well, I'll make contact with Issei Hyodo and the Grail War participants tomorrow. If the dragon-merged one is already attempting to form an alliance among the servants, our intervention should be coordinated with his efforts. Akeno bowed slightly, though her eyes retained their mischievous glint. As you wish, Bushu. Shall I prepare your most impressive entrance for meeting this dragon slayer? First impressions seem particularly important in this case. Just the standard teleportation circle will suffice, Rias replied primly, though a smile tugged at her lips. Our research and resources will make a more meaningful impression than magical theatrics. As Akeno prepared another teleportation circle to return them to their temporary headquarters, Rias cast one final glance in the direction Issei had departed. According to the Gremory archives, the dragon-merged one had wandered between dimensional boundaries for 13 years, preventing smaller convergence events and growing stronger with each draconic essence he absorbed. Those same records hinted at a profound loneliness that accompanied such an existence, a soul literally caught between worlds, belonging fully to none. Something about that resonated with Rias in ways she hadn't anticipated. Despite her status, wealth, and power as heir to the Gremory name, she too had often felt caught between worlds, between the expectations of Devil society and her own desire for authentic connection. An interesting human indeed, she murmured as the teleportation circle activated around her. Perhaps even worth breaking a few Underworld Council directives for. In a flash of crimson light, the devils vanished, leaving behind only the increasingly unstable reality of a city existing at the confluence of multiple dimensions, a precarious arrangement that could not possibly endure for long. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Crimson Intelligence. The Gremory research facility materialized where no building had existed the previous day. To human eyes, the abandoned warehouse at Fuyuki's harbor maintained its decrepit exterior, broken windows, rusting metal, and warning signs deterring trespassers. But this was merely an illusion maintained by powerful devil magic. Within its dimensional pocket, a state-of-the-art magical research complex operated around the clock, monitoring the accelerating convergence of realities. Rias Gremory stood before the central observation array, a complex arrangement of floating magical circles, each displaying different aspects of Fuyuki's deteriorating dimensional stability. Her crimson hair was gathered in a practical ponytail, though several strands had escaped to frame her face after hours of concentrated work. Despite her youthful appearance, her eyes reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge passed through the Gremory archives. The convergence pattern matches the Agara's theorem of multiversal collapse, she noted, manipulating one of the floating diagrams with elegant gestures. The acceleration rate exceeds even their most pessimistic models. Akeno approached with 2 steaming cups, offering one to her king. Perhaps because previous models never accounted for the holy Grail War occurring during an eclipse of the 18 moons. She smiled as Rias accepted the tea gratefully. The astronomical alignment happens once every 3,600 years. The last time it coincided with a Grail War was during the Third Grail War, Rias finished, sipping the perfectly brewed tea, which resulted in the lesser corruption and required direct intervention from my great-grandfather to contain. And now history repeats with greater intensity, Akeno observed, her usual playfulness absent when discussing matters of such gravity. Though this time we have an unexpected variable. Rias didn't need to ask which variable her queen meant. The largest monitoring circle displayed Issei Hyodo's current location as he moved through Fuyuki's southern district, his unique magical signature leaving an unmistakable trail through the dimensional instability. The dragon-merged one's presence changes our approach entirely, Rias acknowledged. According to the archives, his hybrid existence allows him to interact with dimensional boundaries in ways pure entities cannot. Pure entities like devils, you mean, came a new voice as Kiba Yudo, Rias's knight, entered the observation chamber. The handsome blonde carried a heavy tome bound in what appeared to be dragon hide, ancient runes decorating its spine. I found the referenced text in the secure archives, Bushu. Rias accepted the massive book with evident reverence. The Gremory Codex of Dimensional Phenomenology, she identified, carefully opening the ancient volume to reveal pages written in a language predating modern devil script. Last updated during the Kuo Town incident 13 years ago. The incident that created him, Akeno noted, glancing at Issei's monitoring circle. Rias nodded, her fingers racing lines of text with practiced ease despite the archaic language. Survival should have been impossible. Even high-class devils caught in convergence events are torn apart as their essence distributes across incompatible realities. Her expression grew thoughtful, yet somehow, the merging with Deidrag's essence created a being who exists partially outside conventional dimensional constraints. Making him uniquely suited to addressing our current crisis, Kiba observed pragmatically. Are potentially exacerbating it, cautioned Sona Citri as she entered through a transportation circle. Citri Eris adjusted her glasses with precise movements, her analytical gaze immediately taking in the monitoring displays. The Underworld Research Council remains divided on whether Dragon Huma N hybrids stabilize or destabilize interdimensional boundaries. Rias greeted her childhood friend with a warm smile despite the cautionary words. Sona, I didn't expect the Citri contingent until tomorrow. The acceleration of anomalies convinced my sister to approve immediate deployment, Sona explained, her expression remaining serious. 17 new dimensional tiers appeared in the underworld within the past hour alone. The council is concerned. Concerned enough to approve direct intervention? Rias asked, knowing how significant such authorization would be. Sona's slight hesitation answered before her words did. Not officially. We're still classified as an observation and analysis team only. Her eyes met Rias's directly. However, my sister mentioned that some situations require initiative beyond official parameters. The subtle message wasn't lost on anyone present. Seraphal Leviathan, one of the 4 Satans who ruled the underworld, was giving her tacit approval or more direct action while maintaining political deniability. Then it seems we have a measure of operational flexibility, Rias concluded with satisfaction. She returned her attention to the ancient codex, flipping to a specifically marked section. According to these records, the Dragon Merged One has prevented 17 minor convergence events across multiple dimensional planes in the past decade. 17 successful interventions, Sona noted, moving to examine the monitoring displays more closely. That suggests both experience and methodology we lack. Precisely why I intend to establish direct contact. Rias confirmed, closing the codex carefully. His current trajectory suggests he's searching for the nexus points of dimensional instability, the same locations our sensors H. Avenue identified as critical failure risks. She gestured toward one of the magical displays, which showed a 3-dimensional map of Fuyuki with pulsing red markers indicating areas of heightened dimensional distortion. One particular marker, larger than the others, throbbed with ominous intensity near the city's central park. The primary convergence nexus, she identified. According to our calculations, this will be the first point of catastrophic failure if the dimensional boundaries collapse completely. Based on his movement pattern, Issei Hyodo will reach it within the hour. As will we, Sona concluded, understanding Rias's intention immediately, though I must caution that approaching a being of his nature requires careful preparation. The archives describe the Dragon Merged One as volatile when provoked. Only when threatened directly, Rias countered, having studied those same archives extensively. In all other recorded interactions, he's shown remarkable restraint and willingness to cooperate with entities pursuing similar goals. Akino's lips curved in a knowing smile. And you've prepared extensively to make a positive first impression, haven't you, Bushu? A faint blush colored Rias's cheeks despite her attempt at maintaining professional composure. I've prepared appropriate diplomatic overtures based on psychological assessment, she corrected primly. Including wearing your favorite battle attire. Akino teased, gesturing to Rias's elegant yet practical combat uniform, a modified version of Kuo Academy's distinctive uniform reinforced with magical enhancements. Before Rias could formulate a suitably dignified response, one of the monitoring circles flashed urgently, drawing everyone's attention. The magical display showed a sudden spike in dimensional instability precisely at the nexus point they'd been discussing. Temporal folding has begun, Sona observed, her playful exchange with Rias instantly forgotten as she analyzed the readings. The convergence is accelerating beyond projected parameters. Issei Hyodo has changed course, Kiba reported, pointing to the tracking circle. He's moving directly toward the nexus at enhanced speed. As should we, Rias decided, straightening her attire with a quick gesture. Akino, prepare a transportation circle for the primary team. Sona, Can your group establish a containment perimeter around the affected area? Sona nodded sharply, already calculating the optimal formation. As the devils prepared for deployment, Rias cast one final glance at Issei's monitoring display. E-Dragon merged one moved with purpose toward the most dangerous point in Fuyuki's compromised reality, either foolishly brave or possessed of knowledge they desperately needed. Let's hope he's as reasonable as the archives suggest, she murmured, stepping into the transportation circle Akino had prepared. We're running out of time for alternatives. Issei felt the dimensional tear before. He saw it, a sickening lurch in the fabric of reality that sent phantom pain through his left arm where D-Drake's essence concentrated most densely. He paused atop a residential building, extending his draconic senses outward to pinpoint the disturbance. Open double angle bracket ahead 2 kilometers, partner, close double angle bracket. D-Drake's voice rumbled within his consciousness. Open double angle bracket. The Central Park has become a nexus point for multiple reality signatures. The convergence pattern matches the KUOH town event in its early stages. Close double angle bracket. The comparison sent ice through Issei's veins. He'd spent 13 years ensuring nothing like Kuo Town ever happened again. Yet here he faced the same distinctive pattern of interdimensional collapse that had orphaned him and irrevocably altered his existence. Early stages mean we can still stabilize it, he responded, more to reassure himself than his draconic partner. What's the dominant dimensional frequency? Open double angle bracket. Unstable. Fluctuating between our native reality and the servant spirit world. But there. SA third signature emerging. Underworld pattern. Close double angle bracket. Devils, Issei muttered, unsurprised after his earlier glimpse of Rias Gremory. He flexed his left hand, the crimson sigil pulsing in response to his focused will. Boosted gear. Manifest first stage. The dragon-scaled gauntlet materialized over his left arm with a flash of crimson light, extending from fingertips to elbow. Unlike its appearance during combat, this controlled manifestation conserved energy while still providing enhanced sensory capabilities. Issei launched himself toward the park, translucent energy wings carrying him acro. SS Fuyuki's skyline faster than human eyes could track. As he approached, the dimensional distortion became visible even without enhanced senses. Space itself warped around the park's central area, and paths stretching and compressing in physically impossible ways as multiple realities attempted to occupy the same location. Most concerning was the ghostly outline superimposed over the park, a massive Western-style building that Issei recognized instantly from his original reality. Kuo Academy, he breathed, slowing his approach as he observed the phantom school building overlapping with Fuyuki's park. The convergence is pulling directly from my home dimension. Open double angle bracket. Not coincidence. Close double angle bracket. D-Drake rumbled. Open double angle bracket. Your presence likely serves as an anchor point drawing specific realities into alignment. Close double angle bracket. Meaning I could be accelerating the convergence just by being here, Issei concluded grimly, landing at the park's edge where reality remained relatively stable. Perfect. He approached the distortion cautiously. Each step measured as he tested the stability of space before committing his weight. The park had emptied of civilians, either through natural instinct to avoid the wrongness pay, or meeting the area or through some intervention by local authorities. Either way, Issei was grateful for their absence. What was about to happen wouldn't be suitable for ordinary human witnesses. As he neared the center of the distortion, the air thickened noticeably, time itself seeming to flow more sluggishly. Ghostly images from multiple realities flickered around him, students in Kuo Academy. Uniforms walking through classroom spaces that overlapped with Fuyuki's trees, fragments of the underworld's crimson sky visible through tears in Earth's atmosphere, occasional glimpses of the concept. UAL realm where heroic spirits originated. Issei extended his gauntleted hand toward the most pronounced distortion, a pulsing anomaly where a park bench seemed to occupy the same space as a classroom desk. His draconic senses immediately provided detailed information about the dimensional frequencies involved, allowing him to mentally calculate the resonance pattern required to potentially stabilize the tier. Tricky, he muttered. 3 primary realities plus at least 4 secondary bleed-throughs. Standard containment won't work here. Open double angle bracket. The temporal Drake's ability might buy US time, close double angle bracket. D-Drake suggested. Open double-angle bracket slowing the convergence rate could provide opportunity to implement a more permanent solution. Close double-angle bracket. Issei nodded, focusing on the specific draconic essence he'd absorbed 3 years ago. From the temporal drake of the shifting wastes. Unlike some of his abilities that required the boosted gears enhancement, the time manipulation existed independently within his hybrid physiology. Taking a deep breath, he called upon this power, visualizing the specific dimensional frequencies he needed to affect. The air around the distortion shimmered as time itself began to flow differently. Thin the affected area, not stopping completely, but slowing to a fraction of its normal progression. The ghostly images of overlapping realities grew more distinct as their temporal relationship stabilized. That should hold temporarily, Issei said, though strain was evident in his voice. Manipulating time, even in a limited area, demanded significant energy. Now for the tricky part. He was about to attempt a more complex manipulation of the dimensional boundaries when he sensed multiple presences materializing behind him. Powerful magical signatures that registered to his draconic senses as distinctly devil in nature. He didn't turn immediately, focusing instead on maintaining the temporal effect while monitoring the newcomers peripherally. Impressive application of chronomancy, observed a female voice, cultured, confident, and tinged with genuine academic interest, especially considering you're stabilizing 3 conflicting temporal streams simultaneously. Now Issei did turn, though carefully to avoid disrupting his established effect. Rias Gremory stood 10 meters away, accompanied by 4 other devils whose power signatures varied significantly but all registered as formidable. He recognized the situation immediately. This was her peerage, her inner circle of trusted subordinates and allies. Rias Gremory, he acknowledged with a slight nod, neither hostile nor particularly welcoming. I wondered when you'd move beyond observation to direct contact. If his recognition of her identity surprised Rias, she concealed it perfectly. You have the advantage of me, she replied smoothly. Though I suspect you're the entity our archives refer to as the Dragon Merged One. Issei Hyodo, he offered, turning his attention back to the dimensional distortion while maintaining awareness of the devil's positions. And yes, that's one of many dramatic titles I've been given over the years. I prefer my actual name. As would I, Rias agreed, approaching with Maya's steps that demonstrated both confidence and appropriate caution. Her peerage remained slightly behind, positioned to intervene if necessary but not overtly threatening. May I ask what you're attempting to accomplish with this temporal manipulation? Buying time, Issei answered honestly, seeing no benefit in concealing information from potential allies. This convergence nexus is experiencing accelerated dimensional degradation. The time effect slows the process while I determine which boundaries to reinforce first. Rias moved beside him, close enough to observe his work without interfering with it. From this proximity, Issei noted details he'd missed during their distant observation of each other, the intelligence in her aquamarine eyes, the controlled precision of her movements. The subtle magical enhancements woven into her clothing. This was not merely a noble devil relying on inherited status. She was a formidable practitioner in her own right. Our readings indicate T.S. is one of 7 critical nexus points throughout Fuyuki, she informed him, gesturing as a magical circle appeared in the air before her, displaying a detailed map of the city with pulsing indicators. Each corresponds to a major ley line intersection where the Holy Grail or ritual has thin dimensional barriers in previous cycles. Issei glanced at the displayed information, his analytical mind immediately recognizing the value of such comprehensive data. Your monitoring technology is impressive, he acknowledged. More detailed than what I've been able to manage alone. The Gremory Research Division has been studying dimensional phenomena for millennia, Rias explained without false modesty. Though we've never encountered a convergence pattern precisely matching this one. Because it's being manipulated, Issei stated flatly, returning his attention to the distortion. Natural convergence events follow predictable entropy patterns. This one shows evidence of deliberate destabilization at key junctures. Rias's expression sharpened with interest. You're certain? Our analysis suggested possible artificial acceleration but couldn't confirm intentionality. I've witnessed 18 convergence events. Issei replied, the weight of those experiences evident in his voice. Only 3 occurred naturally. The rest were engineered for various purposes, usually by entities that benefit from dimensional chaos. He made a subtle adjustment to his temporal effect, causing the ghostly images to stabilize further. The phantom outline of Kuo Academy gained definition, I visual classrooms becoming distinct within the overlapping space of Fuyuki's park. Your original school, Rias observed softly. From before the Kuo town incident. Issei's movements paused momentarily, surprise evident in his expression as he glanced at her. Your archives are thorough. The Gremory family has maintained records of significant dimensional events for over 4,000 years, she explained. The complete destruction of Kuo town warranted extensive documentation, especially given the unprecedented nature of your survival. Something in her tone, not pity, but genuine understanding, caught Issei off guard. Most beings who knew of his past treated the information clinically or with uncomfortable sympathy. Rias's acknowledgement carried neither, just professional respect tinged with authentic empathy. Before he could respond, the temporal effect surrounding the distortion flickered as a new surge of energy pulsed through the dimensional boundary. Issei immediately refocused, reinforcing the chronomantic containment with visible effort. The degradation is accelerating despite the temporal dampening, he said, tension evident in his voice. Something is activel. Why counteracting my stabilization attempt? Rias turned to her peerage. Akano, secondary containment protocol. Kiba, establish a perimeter. Kaneko, scan for external interference sources. The Devil's moved with practiced efficiency that spoke of extensive training together. The beautiful dark-haired woman, Akano, began crafting complex magical circles that layered around Issei's temporal effect. He blonde young man, Kiba, vanished in a burst of speed so extreme he seemed to teleport, reappearing at various points around the park's boundary. The smallest member of the group, a white-haired girl who appeared barely into her teens, closed her eyes in evident concentration as she extended specialized senses outward. Your team is well coordinated, Issei observed, genuine appreciation in his voice as he adjusted his own efforts to complement Akano's supportive magic. Most devil peerages I've encountered prioritize raw power over tactical synergy. The Gremory approach has always favored quality over quantity, Rias replied, moving her hands in complex patterns as she contributed her own considerable power to the containment effort. Especially in research operations where precision matters more than destructive capacity. Working together, they managed to stabilize the distortion temporarily, the overlapping realities achieving an uneasy equilibrium as multiple types of magic reinforced the weakened boundaries. For a moment, Issei allowed himself cautious optimism. The combined devil techniques complemented his draconic abilities in ways he hadn't anticipated, creating a more robust containment than he could have managed alone. That optimism shattered as Kaneko suddenly stiffened, her eyes snapping open with alarm. Incoming, she stated tersely, her childlike appearance belied by the gravity in her voice. Multiple entities, not from our reality. Before anyone could respond, the air several meters away tore open, not a gradual dimensional tear, but a forced breach that radiated malevolent intent. From this unnatural opening emerged 5 humanoid figures that defied easy classification. They resembled humans in basic structure but moved with jerky, unsettling motions. Their forms partially transparent as if not fully materialized in this reality. Most disturbing were their faces, or rather, the absence of distinct facial features, just smooth expanses only disrupted by rippling distortions. Void walkers, Issei identified grimly, shifting his stance to a combat-ready position while maintaining the temporal containment with his left hand. Kuru, PTED spirits that exist in the dimensional gaps. They feed on boundary instability. Theoretical entities from the void hypothesis, Rias added, recognition and concern evident in her expression. Ever before confirmed in empirical observation. The void walkers paused momentarily, their featureless faces turning in unsettling unison toward the contained distortion. Then, with unexpected coordination, they spread out to surround the devils and Issei. They're drawn to the convergence energy, Issei explained quickly. And they'll attack anything preventing them from feeding on it. We need to maintain the containment while neutralizing them, or they'll tear open the boundaries completely in their feeding frenzy. Rias nodded sharply, instantly grasping the tactical situation. Kiba, Kaneko, defensive formation. Akano, maintain secondary containment. I'll handle offensive measures. Issei was impressed by her immediate battle assessment, especially the recognition that the containment took priority over combat. Many leaders would have abandoned the complex magical work to focus on the immediate threat. The Void Walkers attacked with disturbing synchronization, their forms flickering as they phased partially through conventional space to approach from multiple angles simultaneously. Kiba intercepted the nearest with blinding speed, a sword materializing in his hand as he moved. The blade passed through the entity's semi-corporeal form without apparent effect, though the creature recoiled momentarily from the contact. Physical weapons are ineffective, Kiba reported calmly, adjusting his stance. They exist partially outside conventional matter. Try this, Issei called out, maintaining the temporal containment with his left hand while extending his right toward Kiba. A pulse of crimson energy transferred from Issei to the devil's sword, causing the blade to shimmer with draconic power. Dragon energy exists across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Kiba tested the enhanced weapon immediately, slashing at the nearest Void Walker. This time, the blade connected with substantial resistance, causing the creature to emit a soundless shriek as its form destabilized momentarily. Effective, Kiba confirmed with professional appreciation, immediately adopting new attack patterns to maximize the sword's enhanced capabilities. Meanwhile, Konik-O engaged two Void Walkers simultaneously, her petite form belying tremendous physical strength as she landed powerful blows that disrupted the entity's cohesion. Though she couldn't destroy them outright, her attacks prevented them from approaching the contained distortion. Rias demonstrated why she led this formidable group, her hands weaving complex patterns as she crafted a specialized cation of her power of destruction, the Gremory family's hereditary ability. Rather than the raw destructive force Issei had witnessed other devils employ, Rias created precisely calibrated bursts that targeted the dimensional frequency where the Void Walkers existed most substantially. Your control is impressive, Issei noted as one of the creatures partially disintegrated under her targeted attack. Most destruction magic I've encountered lacks that level of precision. The power of destruction isn't merely about obliteration, Rias replied, continuing her complex casting without breaking concentration. Properly applied, it's about selective deconstruction of specific elements while preserving others. Their coordinated defense held the Void Walkers at bay, but Issei recognized a critical problem developing. The temporal containment was requiring increasing power to maintain as the dimensional distortion fought against stabilization. Simultaneously, combat against entities that existed across multiple dimensional planes demanded specialized energy that depleted their reserves rapidly. We're fighting a losing battle on two fronts, he stated, making a quick tactical assessment. The containment is failing despite our efforts, and these aren't the only Void Walkers that will be attracted to the energy discharge. Rias glanced at him sharply, her tactical mind obviously reaching the same conclusion. You have an alternative approach. A risky one, Issei confirmed. If I release the temporal containment in a controlled manner while simultaneously channeling that energy through boosted gear, I can potentially create a localized dimensional reset, essentially forcing this specific convergence point back to its pre-distortion state. The power requirement would be enormous, Rias observed, instantly grasping the magical theory involved, and the backlash potentially catastrophic if miscalculated. Which is why I haven't attempted it alone, Issei acknowledged. But with your team maintaining a secondary containment barrier to handle the backlash. Rias didn't hesitate long, another quality Issei found himself respecting. Many leaders would waste precious time deliberating when decisive action was required. Akano, reconfigure the containment barrier to absorption parameters, she ordered. Kiba, Kaneko, defensive positions around Issei. I'll establish the energy transfer matrix. As her peerage moved with practiced efficiency to implement her commands, Rias turned to Issei with direct intensity. This will require perfect synchronization in your draconic energy and my power of destruction. Magical symbiosis between dragon and devil power, Issei noted with a grim smile. Theoretically impossible according to most magical traditions. Theory has limitations practical necessity doesn't recognize, Rias countered, moving to stand directly opposite him across the dimensional distortion, her hands extended toward him. Ready when you are, Dragon merged one. Issei nodded once, appreciating her formal acknowledgement of his status despite his earlier preference for his human name. In this context, his draconic nature was indeed the relevant aspect of his identity. Boosted gear. Second liberation, he called out, the partial gauntlet on his left arm expanding into a more complete armored covering that extended to his shoulder. Draconic energy pulsing visibly through its scaled surface. Open double angle bracket boost. Close double angle bracket. Diedrag's voice resonated not just within Issei's mind but audibly to all present, the gauntlet glowing brighter with accumulated power. Issei carefully dissolved the temporal containment effect, not all at once but in a controlled release that channeled the chronometric energy directly into his boosted gear rather than allowing it to dissipate chaotically. Simultaneously, Rias's power of destruction flowed toward him in carefully modulated streams, the normally destructive energy transformed into a complementary force through her exceptional control. The Void Walkers sensed the imminent energy release and intensified their attacks, forcing Kiba and Kaneko to defend with increased urgency. Akino's expressions show the strain of maintaining the complex absorption barrier while the two primary magical practitioners performed their dangerous manipulation. Almost there, Issei said through gritted teeth, the co-MBINED energies building to nearly unbearable levels within his enhanced draconic form. His eyes had shifted fully to their reptilian aspect, vertical pupils glowing with internal fire as he contained power that would have obliterated a normal human instantly. Rias's composure remained remarkable despite the evident strain, her control never wavering as she fed her power of destruction into the matrix in precisely calibrated amounts. On your mark, she confirmed, trusting his judgment for the critical moment of release. Issei waited until the combined energies reached optimal resonance, his draconic senses perceiving harmonic patterns beyond conventional magical theory. At the perfect moment, he called out, open double angle bracket explosion. Close double angle bracket. The accumulated power released in a precisely directed burst, not outward as conventional combat applications would direct, but inward toward the dimensional distortion itself. The effect was visually subtle but metaphysically profound, the overlapping realities fly accelerated through their convergence pattern before snapping back to their original separated states. The ghostly image of Kuo Academy faded from view as the park's normal space reasserted its proper dimensional frequency. The backlash was as severe as Issei had warned. A shockwave of displaced dimensional energy radiated outward, only to be captured by Akino's absorption barrier. Even with this protection, the magical pressure staggered everyone present, forcing Kiba and Kaneko to one knee while Akino visibly struggled to maintain her complex spellwork. Rias weathered the backlash with remarkable resilience. Though even she swayed momentarily under the strain, her eyes never left Issei as he absorbed the brunt of the dimensional reset, his draconic constitution allowing him to endure energies that would have destroyed lesser beings. When the magical turbulence finally subsided, the park had returned to normal, or at least, to this reality's version of normal. The Void Walkers had been banished back to their dimensional gap, unable to maintain presence without the convergence energy to sustain them. The immediate crisis had been averted. Issei allowed the boosted gear to revert to its dormant state, the dragon-scaled gauntlet dissolving back into the sigil on his hand. He took a moment to steady himself, the complex magical working having demanded significant reserves even from his enhanced physiology. Theoretical impossibility successfully accomplished, he noted with subdued satisfaction, looking up to meet Rias's gaze. Your team's coordination is exceptional, as is your understanding of dimensional mechanics, she replied, her professional demeanor softened by genuine respect. That was not a standard application of draconic power. Necessity breeds innovation, Issei said simply. 13 years of preventing convergence disasters provides ample opportunity for experimental techniques. The rest of Rias's peerage had recovered from the magical backlash and regrouped around their king, each assessing Issei with varying degrees of caution and interest. Akino in particular studied him with undisguised curiosity, while Kaneko maintained a dead neutrality that suggested deep-rooted wariness of draconic entities. One nexus point stabilized, Rias observed, consulting a magical monitoring circle that appeared at her gesture. 6 more remain at critical levels, with the eastern harbor showing the most advanced degradation pattern. Issei nodded, already planning his next move. The dimensional reset will hold here temporarily, but without addressing the underlying catalyst, all nexus points will eventually destabilize again. You mentioned deliberate manipulation, Rias reminded him. What evidence supports that conclusion? Instead of immediately answering, Issei extended his senses outward, searching for something specific in the magical resonance patterns surrounding them. After a moment, he approached a seemingly ordinary park bench and crouched beside it, examining something invisible to normal perception. "Here," he said, gesturing for Rias to join him. "Look at the thaumaturgical signature embedded in the dimensional boundary." Rias knelt beside him, extending her own magical senses to perceive what he indicated. Her eyes widened slightly as she detected the subtle pattern, an artificially introduced resin. Ants that disrupted the natural frequency of local space-time. A destabilization array, she identified, her academic knowledge immediately classifying the magical construct. Designed to amplify natural dimensional weaknesses. Precisely, Issei confirmed, and crafted using magic from your reality, not mine or the Holy Grail system. Someone from the devil world is actively encouraging the convergence. Rias's expression darkened at this revelation. That shouldn't be possible without high-level access to dimensional theory. Such knowledge is restricted to upper echelons of devil society, which suggests involvement from someone with considerable resources and authority, Issei concluded. Not a rogue element or minor faction. Their eyes met with shared understanding of the implications. If powerful figures within devil society were deliberately accelerating the dimensional convergence, the political complications would be as dangerous as the magical ones. The Gremory family, why has traditionally opposed dimensional experimentation, Rias stated, her tone making it clear she wanted no misunderstanding about her own position. Our archives document too many catastrophic outcomes from such meddling. I believe you, Issei said simply, surprising himself with how readily he accepted her assertion. Something in her direct manner and evident concern for her team suggested authentic principles rather than political positioning. The question remains who would benefit from a convergence event of this magnitude. Before Rias could respond, a new presence made itself known, not through overt action, but through the subtle shift in dimensional energies that Issei's enhanced senses detected immediately. He turned toward a cluster of trees 30 meters away, his eyes narrowing as he identified the observer. "We're being watched," he said quietly, though he made no aggressive move. "And have been since we began the containment operation." Rias followed his gaze, her own magical senses extending to confirm his assessment. A servant, she identified. Rider class, based on the spiritual resonance. Medusa, Issei confirmed, recalling their encounter the previous night. "She's been following me since our first meeting. Observing rather than interfering." At being discovered, the servant materialized from her concealed position, her distinctive blindfold and long violet hair immediately recognizable. She maintained a cautious distance, her chain daggers visible but not raised in threatening posture. "Your senses are impressive, Dragon Slayer," she acknowledged, her voice carrying easily across the distance. "Few can detect my presence when I choose to remain hidden. Dragon sight perceives across dimensional boundaries," Issei explained with a saws. Ual shrug that belied the rarity of such ability, including the conceptual plane where heroic spirits partially exist. Medusa approached with measured steps, her awareness of the devils evident in her cautious posture. "The convergence affects servants differently than living beings," she stated, addressing both Issei and Rias. "Our conceptual nature makes us more vulnerable to dimensional distortion. 3 servants have already experienced partial dissolution when caught in unstable zones." This new information clearly concerned Rias, who exchanged a significant glance with Issei before addressing Medusa directly. "Are these effects permanent?" "Unknown," Medusa replied with typical directness. "The affected servants remain materialized but report fragmentation of their saint graphs. Memories and abilities becoming disconnected from their core essence. Soul destabilization," Issei translated grimly. "The conceptual matrix that forms a heroic spirit's identity is being pulled apart by conflicting dimensional frequencies." Rias frowned thoughtfully. This could explain why the convergence is accelerating beyond predicted parameters. Heroic spirits exist partially outside conventional space-time. If their conceptual structure is deteriorating, they could be inadvertently feeding the process, Issei finished, immediately grasping the implications. Their fragmentat ion releases conceptual energy directly into the dimensional boundaries. Medusa's concealed gaze shifted between them, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts regarding their rapid collaborative analysis. My master remains unaware of these developments, she stated. I have been conducting independent investigation due to his limitations. The diplomatic phrasing didn't disguise her evident disdain for Shinji Medu. Issei had already assessed the dysfunctional nature of that particular master-servant relationship during their first encounter. Your initiative is appreciated, he said, respecting her autonomy while acknowledging the valuable information she'd provided. The convergence threatens all realities involved, including the conceptual realm from which heroic spirits are summoned. Which is why I followed you, Medusa confirmed. Your methods of dimensional stabilization appear effective, if unconventional. Rias took the opportunity to establish diplomatic contact with this potential ally. The Gremory Research Division has been monitoring the convergence across multiple dimensional planes. We've detected significant disruption in the conceptual realm that serves as the foundation for the Throne of Heroes. Medusa's interest was evident despite her reserved demeanor. Then our concerns align, Devil Princess. The Holy Grail War has become secondary to existential preservation. We're establishing a temporary alliance of affected parties, Issei explained, gesturing to include both Rias's group and Medusa. The dimensional stabilization I prefer. Med here needs to be replicated at 6 additional nexus points throughout Fuyuki. Without coordinated effort, we won't be able to address all critical locations before catastrophic failure occurs. Quote, and after the immediate crisis is contained? Medusa inquired, the pragmatic question revealing her caution about longer-term alliance. We identify and neutralize the source of deliberate interference, Rias answered firmly. Someone is actively destabilizing dimensional boundaries for unknown purposes. Until that entity is stopped, any containment measures will be temporary at best. Medusa considered this briefly before nodding her agreement. A logical approach. I will contribute what information I can gather from other servants regarding the effects on our conceptual framework. This alliance, however tentative, represented significant progress in addressing the convergence crisis. Issei allowed himself cautious optimism that with both devil and servant cooperation, they might act to prevent catastrophic dimensional collapse. That optimism faded as Akeno suddenly approached with evident urgency, a communication circle hovering before her. Bushu. We've received an emergency alert from Sona's team in the Eastern District, she reported, her normally playful demeanor entirely absent. They've discovered a body at the secondary nexus point. A master from the Holy Grail War. Rias's expression sharpened. Identification. Preliminary magical analysis indicates Bazet Fraga Macremets, Akeno replied. But the condition of the remains is unusual. Sona requests your presence immediately. A dead master complicates matters significantly, Medusa observed, her tone suggesting personal concern beyond tactical considerations. Especially one as formidable as the Fraga Magus. Issei was already calculating the implications. If someone is targeting masters specifically, the Holy Grail War's structure could destabilize independently of the dimensional convergence. The two processes occurring simultaneously would accelerate catastrophic failure exponentially. We need to investigate immediately, Rias decided, turning to her peerage. Akeno, prepare transport for all of us, including our new allies if they choose to accompany us. Issei and Medusa exchanged a brief glance, two beings from different dimensional realities who now found themselves reluctant collaborators in preventing multiversal collapse. Despite their significant differences, both recognized the necessity of cooperation in the face of existential threat. I'll come, Issei confirmed. If a master has been killed through means related to the convergence, I may be able to identify dimensional signatures that conventional magical analysis would miss. As will I, Medusa added. Ervants perceive aspects of death differently than the living. This may provide additional insights. As Akeno prepared a large-scale transportation circle to convey them to the Eastern District, Issei took a moment to study their unusual alliance. Devils, a heroic spirit, and a dragon-human hybrid, all temporarily setting aside their natural conflicts to address a common threat. Whether such cooperation could extend beyond immediate crisis management remained to be seen, but for now, it represented their best hope against multiversal annihilation. The transportation circle activated, Sarone. Ding them with crimson light as Rias's family magic prepared to instantly relocate them across Fuyuki. In the moment before teleportation, Issei's enhanced senses detected something disturbing, a subtle pattern in the magical energy structure that suggested familiar manipulation. Wait, he began, but too late. The transportation magic engaged, but instead of the smooth translocation typical of devil teleportation. They experienced a violent lurch as their dimensional coordinates were suddenly altered mid-transfer. The crimson light surrounding them fragmented, shards of magical energy ring across overlapping realities as their destination shifted unpredictably. Issei reacted instinctively, his left arm transforming fully into the boosted gear as he reached out to grab Rias with his right hand. He sensed rather than saw Akeno and Kiba attempting to stabilize the transportation circle while Kaneko braced herself against the dimensional turbulence. Medusa's reaction was equally swift, her chain daggers extending to anchor herself to the fragmenting magical construct. They materialized not in Fuyuki's eastern district as intended, but in a location that defied conventional graphic classification. A disturbing hybrid space where multiple realities overlapped with such intensity that the environment itself appeared as a patchwork of incompatible elements. Fuyuki's urban architecture intermingled with structures Issei recognized from the underworld. Streets abruptly transitioned into otherworldly landscapes before resuming their normal configuration several meters later. Most disorienting were the areas where multiple versions of the same location occupied identical space, creating visual echoes that hurt the mind to perceive directly. Dimensional confluence zone, Issei identified grimly as they regained their bearings. Our transportation was deliberately redirected into an advanced convergence area. Rias quickly assessed their situation, her tactical MI&D processing the implications efficiently. Someone intercepted my family's teleportation magic and modified its destination parameters. That would require intimate knowledge of Gremory magical signatures. And considerable power, Akeno added, her usual playfulness replaced by sharp focus as she analyzed the disrupted magical patterns. This wasn't merely opportunistic interference, it was a paired interception specifically targeting our transportation circle. Kiba had already manifested his sword, moving into a defensive position that protected the group's perimeter. We appear to be in what was once the harbor district, but spatial relationships have become unreliable. Approximately 2 kilometers from our intended destination, Rias confirmed after consulting a modified location spell that struggled to provide accurate coordinates in the distorted space. The secondary nexus point where Sona's team discovered the body. Medusa had maintained her materialization despite the dimensional turbulence. Though Issei noted subtle instability in her form, evidence that the convergence affected heroic spirits more severely than living beings. Despite this, her combat readiness remained uncompromised as she scanned their surroundings with senses that functioned beyond normal vision. We're not alone, she stated with absolute certainty. Multiple entities observe us from the dimensional interstices. Issei extended his dragon sight, perceiving what others could not. The shadowy presences that existed in the spaces between realities, neither fully materialized nor completely intangible. They reminded him of the Void Walkers but possessed greater coherence and evident intelligence. Boundary dwellers, he identified. Entities that naturally inhabit the dimensional gaps. Normally they can't manifest in stable realities, but the convergence is allowing them limited interaction with our plane. Hostile, Rias asked practically, power already gathering around our hands in preparation for potential conflict. Curious more than aggressive, Issei assessed. They're observing the convergence process, possibly for the first time experiencing multiple realities simultaneously without the constraints of dimensional barriers. Before anyone could respond to this assessment, the landscape around them shifted again, buildings stretching and compressing as dimensional frequencies fluctuated unpredictably. The effect was not merely visual but physical, forcing them to adjust their positioning constantly to maintain stable footing. The convergence is accelerating in this location, Rias observed, consulting another magical monitoring circle that flickered unstably in the dimensional turbulence. Temporal distortion indicators suggest this area is experiencing time at approximately 1.3 times the normal rate relative to stable Fuyuki zones. Which means we have less time than calculated to reach the secondary nexus, Issei concluded grimly. And conventional transportation is too risky given the demonstrated vulnerability to interference. Rias nodded her agreement. We proceed on foot, maintaining defensive formation. Akeno, establish a localized stability field to mitigate dimensional fluctuations around our group. As her queen implemented this protective measure, Rias turned to Issei with a direct gaze that conveyed both authority and collaborative respect. Your dragon sight provides the most reliable navigation in these conditions. I suggest you take point position. The practical delegation impressed Issei. Many leaders would have insisted on maintaining forward position regardless of tactical disadvantage. Rias clearly prioritized mission success over personal authority. Agreed, he responded simply, moving to the formation's lead position while maintaining his partial draconic transformation to enhance his perceptual abilities. Medusa should take rear guard. Servant senses will detect pursuit or flanking attempts that might elude even enhanced devil perception. Medusa acknowledged this assignment with a slight nod, her chain daggers held ready as she positioned herself accordingly. The group began moving through the distorted landscape, navigating a path that minimized exposure to the most severely affected convergence zones. Their progress revealed increasingly disturbing evidence of dimensional decay. Ional objects or structures appeared frozen in mid-transformation between realities, a street lamp that became a crystalline growth halfway up its length, a car partially merged with what appeared to be an underworld transport mechanism. Most distressingly, a public bench where one end remained normal while the other had transmuted into some organic material that pulsed with unsettling rhythm. The convergence pattern is unlike standard models, Rias observed as they carefully navigated around a section of sidewalk that rippled with unstable energy. These manifestations suggest selective permeability rather than uniform blending. Controlled convergence, Issei confirmed, his expression darkening. Further evidence of deliberate manipulation. Someone isn't just accelerating the process, they're directing it toward specific outcomes. But to what purpose? Akeno questioned, maintaining the stability field around their group with evident effort. Even high-level devils understand that dimensional collapse threatens all realities equally. Unless they believe they can control the collapse parameters, Issei suggested grimly. History is full of entities who thought they could harness cataclysmic forces for personal advantage. As they continued through the distorted harbor district, Issei became increasingly certain they were being guided rather than merely intercepted. The dimensional fluctuations, while appearing random, subtly channeled their available paths toward a specific destination different from their original target. We're being herded, he finally stated, ousing at an intersection where three different dimensional versions of the same street converged impossibly. The path of least resistance is deliberately structured to lead us northeast rather than due east. Rias immediately grasped the implications. Away from the secondary nexus where Sona's team discovered the body, and toward another convergence point not on your original monitoring network, Issei added. His dragon sight perceiving patterns invisible to conventional senses. There's a dimensional node approximately 500 meters ahead that doesn't match natural formation parameters. A trap, Kiba suggested, his sword shifting slightly as the metal adapted to the fluctuating dimensional energies surrounding them. Or an invitation, Medusa countered from her position at the rear of their formation. Someone with the power to redirect devil teleportation could have simply attacked during transit vulnerability. Instead, they deliver us intact to a specific location. The assessment matched Issei's own tactical analysis. Whoever orchestrated this wants something from us, or wants to show us something. Rias considered their options with admirable composure despite the increasingly hostile environment. The dimensional fluctuations had intensified around them, reality itself becoming less stable with each passing minute. Multiple versions of Fuyuki's Harbor District flickered in and out of perception, some recognizable as simple variations, others so alien they defied conventional description. We proceed with maximum caution, she finally decided. If T.S. is indeed an invitation, as Medusa suggests, declining it means abandoning potential intelligence about our adversary. However, we maintain combat readiness and establish contingency teleportation circles for emergency extraction. As Akeno began preparing these emergency measures, Issei detected a new disturbance ahead, not the chaotic fluctuations of natural convergence, but a structured tier. In reality that displayed evidence of deliberate creation. The dimensional boundary had been precisely incised rather than randomly fractured. Artificial breach ahead, he warned, the boosted gear manifesting more fully in response to potential threat. Someone's cut through the dimensional barrier using a technique I haven't encountered before. The group approached cautiously, their combined magical defenses at maximum readiness. The tear in reality hung suspended in what had once been an ordinary street intersection, its edges glowing with emerald energy that pulsed in regular patterns. Unlike the chaotic fluctuations surrounding them, this was created using fallen angel techniques, Rias identified with surprise, studying the distinctive magical signature. But modified with some other energy I don't recognize. Draconic components, Issei confirmed, his specialized senses detecting the familiar resonance. Someone has combined fallen angel dimensional magic with dragon energy to create a stable breach. Before they could investigate further, the artificial tear expanded suddenly, its circumference doubling as a figure emerged from the emerald light. The being that stepped through defied easy classification, humanoid in basic structure but with both fallen angel and draconic characteristics merged in impossible combination. Black feathered wings extended from the entity's back, while scaled armor covered portions of its body in a pattern reminiscent of draconic protection. Its face remained disturbingly human despite vertical pupils and subtle ridges where eyebrows should have been. Most troubling was the pulsing emerald crystal embedded in its chest, which radiated the same energy that formed the dimensional tier. Dragon merged one, the entity greeted, I.T.'s voice carrying harmonic overtones that suggested multiple beings speaking simultaneously. We have waited long for this meeting. Issei maintained combat readiness while assessing this unprecedented threat. You have me at a disadvantage, he replied cautiously. I don't believe we've been introduced. The entity's expression shifted into something approximating amusement. Names become fluid. When existence spans multiple dimensional frequencies, you may address this composite form as Raziel. A fallen angel designation, Rias noted, her own power gathering subtly as she maintained diplomatic dialogue. Yet your current manifestation incorporates elements beyond standard Gregory classification. Perceptive, Gremory air, Raziel acknowledged with an inclination of its head that nagged to seem both respectful and condescending simultaneously. This form represents the future evolution of all sentient beings, existence unconstrained by singular dimensional parameters. Achieved through forced convergence, Issei stated rather than asked, the entity's nature making its objectives clear. You're deliberately accelerating the dimensional collapse. Not collapse, Raziel corrected with evident disdain. Transcendence. The artificial separation of realities has always been an unnatural constraint imposed by beings who feared true power. As it spoke, the surrounding dimensional distortions intensified, multiple versions of reality flickering more rapidly around them. Issei realized with growing concern that this entity wasn't merely communicating, it was actively manipulating the convergence process through its very presence. You found Bazet Fraga Macremets, Medusa stated suddenly, her concealed gaze fixed on Raziel with evident hostility. Her death signature carries the same energy your form emanates. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before Raziel responded with disturbing serenity. The Fraga Magus resisted enlightenment. Her connection to he bounded field system maintaining artificial dimensional separation made her removal necessary. You murdered her to weaken the barriers, Rias concluded, diplomatic pretense abandoned as the entity confirmed its hostile intentions. How many other masters have you targeted? Only those who serve no purpose in the transcendence, Raziel replied, gesturing casually toward the artificial tear behind it. The dimensional opening expanded further, revealing glimpses of a chamber beyond, a laboratory-like space where multiple magical circles and equipment of both scientific and thaumaturgical nature operated in apparent harmony. Most disturbing was the central apparatus, a modified version of what appeared to be the Holy Grail itself, connected to several unconscious human forms suspended in transparent containment fields. The remaining viable masters serve as conduits, Raziel explained, its tone suggesting it was sharing fascinating research rather than admitting to atrocity. Our connection to the Grail system provides essential pathways for redirecting the convergence energy. Issei had seen enough. This entity, whatever its original nature might have been, had clearly lost all moral constraint in pursuit of its twisted transcendence agenda. The captive masters visible through the dimensional tear confirmed Raziel as an immediate threat requiring neutralization. He prepared to attack, draconic energy gathering visibly around the boosted gear, when Rias placed a restraining hand on his arm. Her expression conveyed not hesitation but tactical assessment. They needed more information before engaging. The convergence threatens all realities involved, she stated, addressing Raziel with remarkable composure given the revelations. Even if your transcendence, Iori proves correct for individuals who achieve your composite state, the vast majority of beings across all affected dimensions would be destroyed in the process. Necessary sacrifice for evolutionary advancement. Raziel dismissed with casual cruelty. The worthy will adapt as I have. The rest are merely developmental casualties. The callous response eliminated any remaining doubt about the entity's malevolence. Issei exchanged a brief glance with Rias, tactical understanding passing between them without words. They would need to coordinate their attack perfectly to have any chance again. Saint, a being that existed partially outside conventional dimensional constraints. Before either could initiate combat, however, Raziel raised a hand in a gesture that was both warning and invitation. I did not arrange this meeting to fight. Dragon Merged 1. Your unique existence represents the spontaneous version of what I have achieved through deliberate transformation. We are kindred beings, the vanguard of a new multiversal order. We are nothing alike, Issei responded, disgust evident in his voice. I fight to protect innocent lives across all dimensions. You sacrifice them for your own warped agenda. Such limited perspective, Raziel sighed, genuine disappointment in its multitonal voice. I had hoped you might understand without demonstration. Perhaps a more personal appeal will prove persuasive. The entity gestured again toward the dimensional tear, which shifted focus to reveal a different section of the laboratory beyond. There, suspended in a specialized containment field that pulsed with complex magical restraints, hung a familiar figure, Shinji Medu, Medusa's nominal master, his unconscious form connected to the modified Grail apparatus by numerous magical conduits. Medusa's reaction was immediate and intense. Despite the dysfunctional nature of her relationship with Shinji, the master-servant bond compelled certain responses regardless of personal feeling. Her chain daggers materialized fully as she took an aggressive step forward. Release him, she demanded, her normally controlled voice carrying deadly promise. Whatever your purpose, he serves no valuable function in your plans. On the contrary, Raziel countered smoothly. His connection to you makes him quite valuable indeed. The master-servant bond transcends conventional dimensional parameters, a natural prototype of the connections I seek to establish on a universal scale. Issei recognized the tactical problem immediately. Raziel was using the captives as both hostages and experimental subjects, preventing direct assault while continuing its convergence acceleration efforts. Conventional combat would endanger the masters and potentially trigger catastrophic dimensional instability if the modified Grail apparatus was damaged incorrectly. Rias had clearly reached the same conclusion. What exactly do you want from us, Raziel? She asked directly, her diplomatic tone now serving to buy time while they assessed options. You arranged this meeting for a specific purpose beyond philosophical debate. The entity's expression shifted to something approaching genuine enthusiasm, a disturbing sight on its hybrid features. Perspective, Gremory air. I brought you here to witness the next phase of convergence directly. The Dragon Merged One's presence will catalyze the process exponentially. While your devil energies provide essential stabilization parameters, you're using us as components in your convergence acceleration, Issei realized with growing alarm. Our mere presence in this artificially created confluence zone amplifies the dimensional degradation. Precisely, Raziel confirmed with inappropriate delight. Even now, your unique energies are being harvested through the dimensional resonance pattern I've established. The more you resist, the more disruptive energy you generate. As if to demonstrate this claim, the dimensional distortions surrounding them intensified visibly. Multiple realities overlapping with increasing frequency. Issei could perceive the energy patterns shifting. Their own attempts at maintaining stability were being RTED through some complex magical formula to actually accelerate the degradation. Akano, collapse the stability field, Rias ordered immediately, understanding the trap they'd entered. Everyone, Namai's active magic use, it's being redirected against dimensional integrity. As her peerage immediately complied, Raziel's expression revealed momentary surprise followed by calculating reassessment. Impressive adaptability. Your reputation for tactical intelligence is well deserved, Gremory heir. And you've revealed your method too soon, Rias countered, her eyes narrowed in analytical focus. Now that we understand the energy redirection principle, we can counter it. Issei had already begun examining the artificial dimensional tier with his specialized senses, looking for vulnerabilities in its construction. Despite its apparent stability, the breach required continuous maintenance from its creator, evidenced by subtle energy fluctuations whenever Raziel's attention shifted. The tear is anchored to your physical form, Issei observed, addressing Raziel directly while positioning himself strategically. You're not merely creating it, you're embodying it. The emerald crystal in your chest serves as the primary dimensional anchor point. Raziel's expression darkened slightly at this accurate assessment. Perceptive. Your draconic senses are indeed as advanced as reports suggested. Another reason your participation is invaluable to the transcendence process. Not interested in your transcendence, Issei replied flatly. But I am interested in how you achieved this hybrid state. The integration of fallen angel and dragon essence should be physiologically impossible without catastrophic rejection. The question served dual purpose, gathering potentially valuable legends while distracting Raziel from Rias's subtle repositioning of her peerage members. Issei had noted her almost imperceptible hand gestures directing her team into a formation that would allow coordinated action despite the dimensional disruption. Conventional boundaries are merely psychological limitations, Raziel responded, evident pride in its achievement overriding caution. The secret lies in dimensional frequency alignment. By synchronizing my original fallen angel resonance with draconic energy harvested during the early convergence events, I achieved harmony where others found only destruction. As Raziel spoke, Issei detected a new presence observing them, not another boundary dweller or convergence entity, but a distinctly human magical signature approaching from outside the distorted zone. The pattern suggested a master from the Holy Grail War, though not one he'd previously encountered. Rias had evidently sensed this as well, her posture shifting slightly to calm. Modate potential new variables in their tactical situation. Medusa remained focused primarily on the dimensional tear showing her captured master, though her combat readiness never wavered. Early convergence events, Issei repeated, maintaining Raziel's engagement while processing this new information. You've been manipulating dimensional boundaries for years, not just during the current Holy Grail War. Decades of careful preparation, Raziel confirmed with unsettling pride. Small convergences strategically triggered to harvest specific energies and test boundary resilience. The Holy Grail War merely provided the ideal catalyst for the final phase, a ritual designed specifically to pierce dimensional barriers. The revelation confirmed Issei's worst suspicions. The 18 Converge NCE events he'd fought to contain over 13 years hadn't all been natural phenomena or random accidents. At least some had been deliberately engineered by this entity as experiments leading to the current crisis. You caused Kuo Town, he stated, rage building beneath his controlled exterior as the implications became clear. That wasn't a natural convergence. You triggered it. Raziel's expression shifted to something approximating regret, though the emotion seemed performative rather than genuine. An unfortunate miscalculation in the early phases of my research. The dimensional resonance NCE amplified beyond predicted parameters, resulting in complete structural collapse rather than controlled convergence. The casual acknowledgement of responsibility for the catastrophe that had destroyed Issei's hometown and everyone he'd ever known threatened to shatter his tactical restraint. Draconic energy flared visibly around him as Ddrake's essence responded to his emotional state. Open double angle bracket control, partner. Close double angle bracket Ddrake's voice cautioned within his mind. Open double angle bracket this entity seeks to provoke emotional response to increase energy output. Close double angle bracket. The warning helped Issei maintain discipline despite the rage burning through him. Raziel was manipulating him deliberately, attempting to trigger the very power outburst that would accelerate the convergence process. Your research killed 87,000 people, he stated with deceptive calm. And you've continued experimenting regardless of the consequences. Necessary sacrifice for evolutionary advancement, Raziel repeated its earlier justification. Though I must acknowledge your survival proved unexpectedly valuable. The spontaneous human-dragon synthesis you represent provided essential data for my own transformation. Before Issei could respond to this disturbing revelation, the approaching magical signature he'd detected earlier arrived at the perimeter of the distorted zone. A woman stepped into view, tall and elegant with long black hair and traditional Japanese clothing that seemed incongruously formal amidst the dimensional chaos. Despite her human appearance, Issei's dragon sight detected non-human elements carefully concealed beneath masterful illusion. Raziel. The newcomer addressed the entity directly, her voice carrying authority despite its soft volume. The council did not authorize direct confrontation at this stage. The hybrid being turned toward her with visible annoyance. Yusaka, your timing is characteristically inconvenient. Rias's expression revealed recognition of the name, though she maintained her diplomatic neutrality as she assessed this new development. Issei immediately identified the woman's true nature, a powerful yokai, specifically a nine-tailed fox in human form, her suppressed energy signature suggesting leadership status within yokai hierarchy. The convergence acceleration exceeds approved parameters, Yusaka stated, ignoring Raziel's evident irritation as she surveyed the dimensional distortions with evident concern. The Kyoto boundaries are experiencing critical instability. My territory was guaranteed protection in our agreement. This exchange revealed yet another layer of complexity in their situation. Apparently, some yokai faction had entered into arrangements with Raziel regarding the convergence process. Whether as willing collaborators or coerced participants remained unclear. Temporary boundary fluctuations are unavoidable during transition phases. Raziel dismissed her concerns with casual arrogance. Your territory will stabilize once the primary convergence completes. Unacceptable, Yusaka responded, her composure unwavering despite the dismissal. The agreement specified gradual integration with localized stability maintenance throughout the process. These conditions are not being met. As this exchange continued, Issei noted Rias using the distraction to complete her peerage's repositioning. Kiba had gradually shifted to a position directly opposite the dimensional tear, while Kaneko had moved closer to where the captive masters were visible through the breach. Akeno maintained her position near Rias but had subtly begun gathering specialized sealing magic rather than direct offensive power. The tactical intent became clear to Issei. They were preparing for simultaneous assault on both Raziel and the dimensional tear, with priority on rescuing the captive masters rather than immediately defeating the hybrid entity. It was a sound strategy given the circumstances, though success would require perfect coordination. Medusa had evidently reached similar conclusions, her position now optimized for rapid advance through the dimensional tear when opportunity presented itself. Her concern for her master, however problematic, their relationship, provided motivation that aligned with the devil's tactical objectives. Yusaka's unexpected arrival had created the perfect distraction. Raziel's attention was divided between maintaining the dimensional tear, harvesting energy from the convergence process, and addressing this apparent ally's complaints about violated agreements. Issei caught Rias's eye, a silent exchange confirming readiness for coordinated action. With minute gestures, they established timing. Issei would initiate with a focused dragon shot to disrupt Raziel's concentration. Kiba would immediately target He dimensional tear's edges to stabilize them against collapse, while Kaneko and Medusa would enter to retrieve the captive masters. Akeno and Rias would implement containment measures to prevent Raziel from escaping or collapsing the breach prematurely. As they prepared to execute this plan, Yusaka suddenly glanced directly at Issei, her expression revealing awareness of their intentions. Rather than exposing their strategy, however, she intensified her confrontation with Raziel, stepping closer to the hybrid entity with increased vehemence. The Kyoto yokai fulfilled our portion of the agreement, she insisted, her voice rising just enough to ensure Raziel's complete attention. We provided the specialized containment materials you required and maintained secrecy despite underworld inquiries. In return, you guaranteed our territorial integrity throughout the convergence process. The mention of yokai involvement providing specialized materials suggested another piece of the complex puzzle. Issei filed this information away while maintaining combat readiness, waiting for the perfect moment to initiate their assault. That moment came when Raziel fully turned toward Yusaka, the emerald crystal in its chest momentarily angled away from their position as it addressed the yokai leader with growing irritation. Your concerns are noted, 9 tails, but the acceleration timeline cannot be altered at this stage. The dragon merged one's presence provides essential catalytic energy that Issei struck with precision rather than raw power, a concentrated dragon shot aimed not at Raziel directly but at the emerald crystal embedded in its chest. Simultaneously, Rias's peerage executed their assigned roles with flawless coordination, Kiba flashing forward with supernatural speed. To stabilize the dimensional tear's boundaries, Kaneko launching herself toward the breach with Medusa immediately behind her. Raziel reacted with impressive speed despite the surprise, twisting to partially evade Issei's attack. The concentrated dragon energy grazed rather than directly impacted the emerald crystal, causing visible damage but not the complete disruption they'd hoped for. Betrayal from all sides. The entity snarled, its harmonious voice distorting with rage as it gathered retaliatory power. The convergence will proceed with or without your willing participation. Before it could launch a counterattack, Yusaka revealed her own deception. Her hand thrust forward, fingers forming a complex magical seal that locked onto the damaged crystal in Raziel's chest. Kitsune Binding Art. 9 Realms Restriction. She intoned, golden energy erupting from her palm to envelop the hybrid entity in constraining patterns. The unexpected assistance from the apparent yokai collabo Raider created crucial seconds for their operation to proceed. Kiba successfully stabilized the dimensional tear using a specialized sword that seemed to pin the breach's edges to local reality. Kaneko and Medusa had already entered the laboratory beyond, moving with coordinated efficiency toward the captive masters. Rias and Akeno implemented their containment protocols, complex magical circles Ani festing around Raziel to prevent dimensional displacement. The hybrid entity fought against these multiple restraints with growing desperation, the damaged crystal in its chest pulsing erratically. As it struggled to maintain control of the convergence process, Issei advanced with methodical purpose, the boosted gear fully manifested as he prepared a more definitive strike. Your experiments end here, Raziel. Whatever you hope to achieve through dimensional convergence isn't worth the lives you've sacrificed. You understand nothing. The entity raged, its form beginning to flicker bedway. N-dimensional frequencies as it fought against the combined restraints. The artificial separation of realities is the true abomination. Beings meant to exist in harmonious unity have been fragmented across arbitrary boundaries for millennia. Despite its increasingly unstable condition, Raziel managed to direct a desperate attack toward the dimensional tear where Kaneko and Medusa were extracting the captive masters. A lance of emerald energy erupted from the damaged crystal, threatening to collapse the breach with their allies still inside. Issei intercepted the attack without hesitation, his boosted gear absorbing the dimensional energy before it could reach the stabilized tier. The power influx sent pain surging through his hybrid body as his system struggled to process energy specifically designed to manipulate dimensional boundaries. Hurry, he called to those beyond the breach, his voice strained as he contained the volatile energy. The tear won't hold much longer. Through the stabilized opening, he could see Kaneko and Medusa working efficiently to disconnect the unconscious masters from the modified Grail apparatus. The petite devil's enormous strength allowed her to carry 2 victims simultaneously. While Medusa focused on retrieving her own master despite obvious damage to the specialized equipment surrounding him. Yusaka had maintained her binding spell with remarkable discipline. Golden energy continuing to restrain Raziel despite the entity's increasingly erratic dimensional fluctuations. The crystal must be removed, she called to Issei and Rias. Chi serves as both power source and dimensional anchor for his composite form. Rias immediately adjusted their strategy, redirecting Akeno's sealing magic to target the emerald crystal specifically rather than Raziel's entire form. Focus containment on the crystal's frequency pattern, she instructed. If we can isolate it from his body, the hybrid state should destabilize. Issei recognized the sound tactical adjustment and modified his own approach accordingly. Rather than attempting to destroy Raziel directly, which might release catastrophic dimensional energy, they would separate the NT. Tie from its power source and anchor point. Boosted gear. Third liberation, he called out, his armor extending further as Dedrag's power responded to his heightened need. The gauntlet evolved into a more complete draconic covering that extended up his arm and across his torso, crimson scales providing both protection and enhanced energy manipulation capabilities. Open double angle bracket boost. 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 Close double angle bracket. D-Drags. Voice echoed as the boosted gear multiplied Issei's base power. Rather than releasing this enhanced energy as a destructive force, Issei channeled it into a precisely calibrated extraction technique. A modification of his dragon-slaying abilities designed to separate specific energies from their hosts. Dragon Purge, he stated with focused intent, directing the specialized energy toward the crystal embedded in Raziel's chest. The technique manifested as crimson light that penetrated the entity's defenses, wrapping around the emerald crystal with increasing pressure. Raziel's response was immediate and desperate. No, the synchronization cannot be disrupted at this stage. The hybrid being's form began shifting more rapidly between dimensional states as it fought against the extraction attempt. Portions of its body temporarily phasing out of conventional reality before returning at different coordinates. Despite this resistance, the combined efforts of Issei, Rias, Akeno, and Yusaka gradually overcame Raziel's defenses. The emerald crystal began separating from the entity's chest, its connection to the hybrid form weakening as multiple types of containment magic isolated it from its host. Through the dimensional tear, Kaneko emerged carrying two unconscious masters, Bazit Fraga Makremitz, apparently alive despite earlier reports of her death, and another Magus Issei didn't recognize. Medusa followed immediately after, with Shinji Meitu's limp form secured in her arms, her expression grim but determined. The apparatus is set to trigger catastrophic convergence in approximately 3 minutes. She reported as she cleared the breach. Some form of countdown sequence activated when we removed the masters. This new development added urgency to their already critical situation. With the captives secured, they needed to neutralize both Raziel and the modified Grail apparatus before the programmed convergence sequence completed. Kiba, Kaneko, get the masters to safe distance. Rias ordered without hesitation. Akeno, prepare emergency teleportation for our entire group. As her peerage moved to implement these commands, Issei maintained focus on extracting the emerald crystal. The process had reached a critical stage. The artifact was now visibly separated from Raziel's body, suspended between them in a complex network of containment magic from multiple traditions. You cannot stop the convergence, Raziel insisted, though its voice had lost the harmonic quality that characterized its hybrid state. As the crystal separated further, the entity's form Bega, N reverting toward its original nature, the draconic elements fading as the fallen angel components reasserted dominance. The process has progressed beyond the control of any single catalyst. Perhaps, Yusaka acknowledged, her binding spell adapting as Raziel's form changed. But without your guidance, the convergence will follow natural patterns rather than your artificial direction. Issei understood the implication immediately. Natural convergence, while still destructive, followed predictable mathematical progression that could potentially be countered using established techniques. Raziel's artificial manipulation had created the truly dangerous unpredictability that threatened catastrophic multiversal collapse. With a final surge of concentrated effort, Issei completed the extraction. The emerald crystal separated completely from Raziel, immediately contained within multiple layers of magical barriers created by Rias and Akeno. The hybrid entity collapsed to its knees, its foe. Now predominantly fallen angel with only residual draconic features rapidly fading. 2 minutes until convergence trigger, Medusa warned, her enhanced servant senses monitoring the apparatus beyond the breach. The modified Grail is approaching critical instability. We need to collapse the tear, Issei determined, already calculating the precise application of energy required. Seal off T. He laboratory and contain the convergence trigger within its own pocket dimension. Rias immediately grasped the strategy. Dimensional isolation rather than direct neutralization. The convergence N, or G would feed back on itself rather than expanding outward. Exactly, Issei confirmed, but we'll need to synchronize multiple closure techniques simultaneously. No single magical tradition can seal a breach of this complexity. Without hesitation, Rias turned to Yusaka. The Kitsune sealing arts would complement our devil techniques for the upper quadrants. The yokai leader nodded sharply, professional respect overriding any lingering questions about her earlier relationship with Raziel. My binding arts can secure the northern and eastern boundaries. Draconic energy for the foundation, Issei added. The boosted gear pulsing as he gathered the necessary power. And servant conceptual authority for the temporal anchoring. Medusa understood her role immediately, moving to pause it. Ion herself opposite Issei along the dimensional tear's perimeter. My noble phantasm can temporarily petrify the conceptual framework, providing stability during the closure process. With their roles established, the four beings from different dimensions and magical traditions began the complex closure operation. Issei provided the foundational energy, draconic power flowing from the boosted J.A.R. to establish a baseline dimensional frequency that the others could build upon. Rias and Akino crafted intricate devil magic that restructured local space-time around the breach, gradually compressing its circumference. Yasaka's kitsune binding arts secured the weakest portions of the boundary, golden energy weaving through the tear's edges to prevent further deterioration. Medusa contributed He final component, her mystic eyes partially activated behind her blindfold, sending controlled petrification energy that temporarily froze the conceptual framework of the tear itself. Beyond the shrinking breach, the modified Grail apparatus continued its countdown sequence, energy building toward catastrophic release. As the dimensional tear contracted under their combined efforts, Issei could see the laboratory beginning to destabilize, equipment floating free as gravity fluctuated, energy discharges arcing between surfaces as containment systems failed. 30 seconds to convergence trigger, Medusa reported, maintaining her position despite the increasing dimensional pressure around them. The tear had reduced to approximately one-third its original size, the laboratory beyond now visible only through a rapidly shrinking aperture. Raziel, still weakened from the crystal's removal, watched with evident despair as its life's work collapsed inward upon itself. You condemn us all to continued fragmentation. The fallen entity lamented. The unity of all existence was within our grasp. Unity through destruction isn't unity at all, Issei responded, maintaining focus on the closure process despite the distraction. True convergence must preserve rather than destroy. With a final coordinated effort from all four practitioners, the dimensional tear contracted to a pinpoint before sealing completely with a concussive release of displaced energy. The shockwave knocked everyone backward several meters, though their various defensive abilities prevented serious injury. As the dust settled, they found themselves in a temporarily stabilized pocket of space. The surrounding dimensional distortions had normalized, though Issei could sense this was merely a localized effect that wouldn't extend to the broader convergence problem. Containment successful, Rias confirmed after consulting a monitoring circle. The convergence trigger detonated within the isolated pocket dimension. Effects contained without breaching to our reality. A temporary victory, Yasaka cautioned, her expression solemn as she straightened her traditional attire. The broader convergence continues, merely deprived of its artificial acceleration catalyst. Raziel, now appearing almost entirely as a standard fallen angel with only faint draconic ridges remaining around its eyes, left weakly from where it had collapsed against a nearby wall. The process has progressed too far for simple reversal. The boundaries will continue deteriorating, just at a slower pace than I had designed. Issei approached the fallen entity. The boosted gear still manifested though no longer radiating active combat energy. Who helped you? He demanded. The materials, the research, the modified Grail apparatus. No single being could have accomplished all this alone. Allies exist in all realms for those who recognize the truth of unified existence, Raziel replied cryptically, its once harmony. Alf's voice now reduced to a raspy approximation of its former resonance. The Great Convergence has adherents across dimensions who understand the artificial nature of our separation. Before Issei could press for more specific information, Akino approached with evident urgency. The teleportation network has stabilized temporarily, she reported to Rias. We should extract immediately while dimensional parameters allow safe transport. Quote, Rias nodded, turning to address Yasaka with formal diplomatic courtesy. Your assistance was unexpected but invaluable. I hope this represents the true positive of Kyoto's yokai rather than your earlier apparent alliance with Raziel. The nine-tailed fox's expression revealed little, her composure perfect as she responded with equal formality. Kyoto's interests are best served by dimensional stability, not catastrophic convergence. My actions reflect this priority. The carefully worded response neither confirmed nor denied previous collaboration with Raziel. Maintaining diplomatic ambiguity while establishing current alignment with their containment efforts. Issei noted this negotiation technique with appreciation for its elegant efficiency. Yas. aka was clearly a skilled political operator as well as a powerful practitioner. The masters require immediate medical attention, Medusa interjected, her priority unchanged despite the complex political maneuvering around her. Whatever Raziel's apparatus did to them has caused significant spiritual damage. This practical concern refocused everyone on immediate necessities. Rias instructed Ino to expand the teleportation circle to accommodate their entire group, including the rescued masters, Yasaka, and, after brief consideration, the now powerless Raziel as a prisoner for interrogation. As the teleportation circle activated around them, Issei cast one final look at the location where they had sealed the dimensional tier. His enhanced senses could detect residual energy still pulsing. Behind the closed breach, contained for now, but not truly neutralized. Like everything they had accomplished thus far, it represented a temporary solution to a problem that continued growing beyond their immediate influence. The crimson light of Gremory teleportation magic enveloped them, and this time, no interference disrupted their journey. They materialized within the safety of Rias's research facility, the abandoned warehouse exterior concealing the state-of-the-art magical complex where additional devil researchers immediately moved to secure Raziel and provide medical attention to the rescued masters. As the immediate crisis subsided and various specialists took charge of different aspects of the aftermath, Issei found himself standing somewhat apart from the activity, processing the revelations of the past hours. Raziel's confirmation of responsibility for the Kuo town disaster 13 years ago had reopened wounds he'd thought long scarred over. He was so absorbed in Issei thoughts that he initially failed to notice Rias approaching until she spoke. "The masters are stabilizing," she informed him quietly. "Whatever Raziel did to them appears reversible with proper magical intervention." Issei nodded acknowledgement, grateful for the positive development despite his preoccupation. "And the crystal? Secure in our most heavily warded containment chamber," Rias replied. "Preliminary analysis suggests it's some form of conceptual matrix crystal, possibly from the boundary realm itself. How Raziel acquired such an artifact? As one of many questions we need answered," Issei finished, his expression grim as he gazed at the secured area where the fallen entity was being held. "Along with the identity of these adherents across dimensions he mentioned." Rias studied him with perceptive concern, noting the subtle tension in his posture that belied his outward composure. "Learning the truth about Kuo town cannot have been easy," she observed with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Discovering that your family's deaths weren't simply a natural disaster but the result of deliberate experimentation changes nothing about my purpose," Issei stated firmly, though the slight roughness in his voice betrayed the emotional impact beneath his disciplined exterior. "Preventing convergence disasters has been my mission for 13 years. The fact that me were artificially triggered only makes that mission more necessary." Rias seemed about to respond when Sona Citri approached, her expression serious as she consulted a magical monitoring display. "The secondary nexus points are showing increased instability despite Raziel's neutralization," she reported without preamble. "Whatever he set in motion continues advancing independently of his direct control." "As he claimed it would," Issei noted grimly. "The process has progressed beyond dependency on any single catalyst." "Then our work has only begun," Rias concluded, her brief moment of personal concern yielding to necessary leadership. "We need to stabilize the remaining nexus points while interrogating Raziel for more detailed information about his methods and accomplices." As they turned to rejoin the main research group, Medusa approached from where she had been monitoring her master's treatment. "The dimensional stability you created at the park has already begun deteriorating," she informed them. "The convergence pattern is adapting to our countermeasures, finding new pathways through the weakened barriers." This concerning update confirmed what Issei had suspected, why we're facing an intelligent process rather than merely a cascading physical phenomenon. The convergence itself seemed to be learning from their interventions, evolving new approaches to continue its progression despite their efforts to contain it. "We need to address the source, not just the symptoms," he stated, a new determination replacing his momentary introspection. "The Holy Grail itself remains the primary catalyst. Until we neutralize or redirect its dimensional piercing function, we're merely delaying the inevitable." Rias nodded her agreement, already formulating strategic adjustments. "Then our next objective is clear. we need to directly access the core Grail system and modify its fundamental parameters. A task that will require cooperation from all masters and servants, Sona added pragmatically. Many of whom still believe they're participating in a conventional Holy Grail war rather than fighting for multiversal preservation. Then we convince them, Issei stated simply. Starting with those we've already rescued. As the three of them moved to join the broader strategic planning session, Yusaka observed from a carefully maintained distance, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts regarding these developments. The nine-tailed fox leader had positioned herself as neither fully allied nor opposed to their efforts, a calculated neutrality that maintained maximum flexibility for her faction's interests. Medusa fell into step beside Issei, her blindfolded gaze directed forward but her awareness clearly encompassing him. Your enemy has a face now, she observed quietly. Does that provide satisfaction or merely complicate your purpose? The perceptive question caught Issei slightly off guard. Medusa had recognized the personal impact of Raziel's revelations with surprising insight for someone who barely knew him. Perhaps her own experience with divine punishment and transformation allowed her to recognize similar patterns in others. No, Raziel was responsible for Kuo Town brings clarity, not satisfaction, he answered honestly. And it confirms that preventing further convergence disasters is even more crucial than I believed. These aren't random natural phenomena, they're deliberate attacks on reality itself. Medusa nodded once, a gesture that conveyed understanding without unnecessary verbalization. As they continued Taua rode the planning area where Rias was already organizing the next phase of their response, Issei found himself appreciating the servant's straightforward approach, so different from the complex political positioning of devils and yokai. Yet equally valid in its directness. Their unusual alliance had achieved its first significant victory against the forces accelerating dimensional convergence. But Sona's monitoring displays clearly showed, the broader crisis continued unabated. 7 nexus points throughout Fuyuki still pulsed with increasing instability, reality itself growing thinner at these critical junctions. And beyond Fuyuki, across multiple dimensions, countless other beings remained unaware of the approaching catastrophe that threatened to unmake existence as they knew it. The true battle was just beginning. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Gorgon's Truth. Silence was a language Medusa had mastered over millennia. In her divine youth, silence had been contemplation, the peaceful meditation of a goddess venerated for her beauty. During her monstrous exile, silence became survival, the hushed patience of a predator awaiting unwary travelers. As a heroic spirit, silence served as both shield and weapon, concealing vulnerabilities while observing others. Now, as she moved through Fuyuki's pre-dawn shadows, silence was her natural state. Her footfalls made no sound on rain-slicked pavement. Her breathing remained imperceptible even to enhanced senses. Only the occasional soft clink of her chain daggers against ornate metal leg bands betrayed movement. She paused atop a half-constructed office building, surveying the city through her mystic blindfold. Fuyuki appeared deceptively normal from this vantage, streetlights casting warm halos through lingering mist, occasional vehicles navigating empty streets. Neon signs from late-night establishments providing colorful counterpoints to the darkness. Yet her servant senses perceived what human eyes could not, the dimensional fractures spreading like spiderweb cracks across reality's surface. What had begun as isolated tiers now formed an interconnected network of weakened boundaries. Some areas had deteriorated too. Translucent barriers where overlapping realities bled visibly into one another. Ghostly architecture from other dimensions temporarily superimposed over Fuyuki's familiar landscape before fading back into their native planes. Worsening exponentially, she murmured, her first words since departing the Gremory research facility hours earlier. Shinji remained there, still unconscious but stabilizing under devil medical protocols. His continued incapacitation provided Medusa rare autonomy to pursue her own investigations without navigating her master's perpetual inadequacies. She would never wish harm upon him. Their contract demanded certain loyalties regardless of personal feelings, but his absence created operational freedoms she intended to utilize fully. Her attention shifted to a particle. Dimensional distortion near Fuyuki's western hills, a persistent anomaly her senses had detected repeatedly during reconnaissance. Unlike the chaotic fluctuations characterizing most convergence points, This distortion maintained consistent parameters despite the surrounding deterioration. Deliberate stabilization. Someone was maintaining that specific tear with precision while allowing others to degrade naturally. Medusa prepared to investigate this anomaly when a presence materialized behind her, arriving with such silent efficiency that even her enhanced perception registered the arrival mere moments before the voice spoke. Finding anything interesting, she didn't startle. Millennia of existence had eliminated such reflexive responses, but she did turn with greater speed than her typically measured movements. Issei Hyodo stood several meters away, his casual posture belying the extraordinary means he must have employed to approach undetected. The crimson sigil on his left hand pulsed softly, suggesting recent activation of draconic abilities. "You masked your presence effectively," she acknowledged, neither compliment nor accusation but simple observation. "Spatial displacement technique," he explained, approaching until they stood as equals at the building's edge. "Borrowed from the Shadow Drake of Avalon. Useful for observation without disrupting dimensional stability through active magic." Medusa noted how he referenced draconic abilities, not with pride or power fixation typical of enhanced beings, but with practical assessment of utility. Another difference, separating him from most entities of significant strength she'd encountered throughout her extensive existence. "You've been tracking me since midnight," she stated rather than asked, having sensed occasional disturbances in spatial cohesion that now made sense given his explanation. Issei didn't deny it. "Your investigation patterns suggested systematic analysis rather than random patrol. I was curious what you'd discovered." "Deliberate stabilization at specific convergence points," she replied directly, gesturing toward the western hills. "That location maintains dimensional cohesion height accelerating deterioration elsewhere. The energy signature differs from both Raziel's techniques and your containment methods." Interest sharpened his expression as he followed her indication. His eyes briefly flashed with draconic luminescence, vertical pupils focusing with inhuman intensity before returning to their more human appearance. "You're right," he confirmed after a moment. "That SA-controlled breach being actively maintained through some form of anchoring mechanism. The dimensional frequency suggests temple magic." The last phrase held questioning inflection, not doubt in his assessment but invitation for her input. Another unusual quality Medusa had observed in their limited interactions, Issei consistently treated her observations as valuable rather than secondary to his own analysis. "Ancient thaumaturgy with divine resonance patterns," she agreed, comparing the distant energy signature to magical systems from her era. "Similar to boundary wards used in certain mystery cults of my time, though modified for dimensional rather than territorial applications." Issei considered this with thoughtful focus. "Temple ruins exist beneath Fuyuki's western district, predating the city's formal establishment by several centuries. The Tasaka family records reference ancient worship sites but provide minimal detail about their purpose or origin. Records can be deliberately obscured," Medusa noted, recalling how even divine histories had been selectively curated to diminish certain truths. Her own transformation from goddess to monster had been similarly sanitized in official mythologies, removing contextual elements that might engender sympathy rather than horror. "Worth investigating directly," Issei concluded. He glanced eastward where first light had begun lightening the horizon. "We have approximately 2 hours before the Gremory team expects reports from field observers. Enough time for preliminary reconnaissance if we move efficiently." His raising included her without presumption, neither commanding her participation nor requesting it explicitly. Simply acknowledging their shared purpose while respecting her autonomy to decline if she preferred. Medusa considered briefly. Her original intention had been solitary investigation, maintaining independence from the increasingly complex alliances forming around the dimensional crisis. Yet, practical assessment suggested combined reconnaissance offered tactical advantages. Issei's draconic abilities complemented her servant capabilities in ways that enhanced their collective effectiveness against unknown variables. "Agreed," she stated simply, stepping closer to the building's edge. "Conventional approach or alternative transportation?" "Conventional would minimize dimensional disruption," he replied, though the small smile accompanying his words suggested appreciation for less practical considerations. "Though I admit certain draconic abilities make travel considerably more enjoyable than public transportation." Without further discussion, Translucent crimson wings materialized from his back. Not physical appendages but crystallized draconic energy capable of defying conventional physics. Medusa recognized the manifestation technique as significantly more refined than his previous displays during combat situations, evidence of precise control rather than expedient deployment. Responding to his unspoken invitation, she activated her own mobility capabilities. As a rider-class servant, her supernatural speed allowed traversal methods impossible for most beings. She didn't require flight to achieve effective aerial movement, just strategic contact points and momentum manipulation that most physics would consider impossible. Together they departed the observation point, Issei through direct flight, Medusa through impossibly graceful leaps that used minimal surface contact to maintain trajectory. They moved westward toward the dimensional anomaly, two beings from different realities demonstrating complementary movement techniques while maintaining parallel courses. Despite never having operated together before, they established natural synchronization, adjusting speed and trajectory through subtle cues rather than verbal coordination. Medusa found herself appreciating this effortless compatibility. Most partnerships required extensive adjustment periods, yet their respective abilities seemed naturally complementary without conscious accommodation. They reached Fuyuki's western district as dawn's first true light crested the eastern mountains. The Anyo Mawe Medusa had detected now became visible even without enhanced perception, a subtle distortion in visual space surrounding what appeared to be an abandoned shrine entrance partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. Issei landed silently beside her on a rooftop overlooking the location. His wings dissipated into particles of crimson light that briefly illuminated his thoughtful expression as he studied the site. Definitely deliberate concealment, he observed, voice lowered despite their distance from potential observers. The overgrowth pattern follows mathematical precision rather than natural growth algorithms. Someone wants this to appear abandoned while maintaining actual accessibility. Medusa nodded, having already noted the same artificial pattern. Recent activity, she added, indicating nearly imperceptible disturbances in the ground covering. Within the past 12 hours, based on moisture displacement patterns. Issei gave her an appreciative glance. Your observational skills are exceptional. He noted without flattery, simple acknowledgement of professional capability. Most beings wouldn't detect such subtle indicators, especially without specialized sensory enhancements. Medusa didn't respond directly to the compliment, though something within her, a part long dormant since her transformation from divinity to monstrosity, registered unexpected warmth at G. A genuine recognition of her abilities rather than focus on her fearsome reputation or physical attributes. We should investigate directly, she stated, returning to practical matters. The dimensional stability suggests whatever lies below remains relatively protected from convergence effects. They descended from their observation point with continued silence, approaching the concealed shrine N. Trance using natural cover to minimize potential detection. Closer inspection revealed sophisticated protections integrated with the apparently abandoned structure, magical barriers layered with both defensive and perceptual disruption capabilities. Interesting, Issei murmured, crouching to examine specific ward patterns without directly contacting them. These contain elements from at least 3 distinct magical traditions: Eastern Temple Consecration, Western Hermetic Boundaries, and something older. Medusa studied the third component he'd identified, recognition forming slowly as shish. He compared the patterns to ancient magical systems predating even her divine existence. Pre-Olympian, she identified with rare surprise. These symbols belong to magic systems that existed before he pantheons of my era established dominance. They were considered archaic even during my time as a goddess. Issei looked up sharply at this revelation, both surprise and academic interest visible in his expression. You recognize them specifically. That would date these patterns to over 3,000 years ago at minimum. Older, Medusa corrected, kneeling beside him to indicate specific elements within the complex pattern. These particular formations reference what my sisters and I knew as the first temple traditions, magical systems supposedly established when divinity and draconic entities shared governance of reality's fundamental structure. The significance of this connection visibly registered with Issei, his expression shifting from academic interest to deeper concern. Connection between divine beings and dragons would explain certain anomalies in the convergence pattern. If these temples were specifically designed to maintain boundaries between those primordial forces, then the current convergence might represent failure of ancient containment rather than merely new interference. Medusa completed, their analytical processes again demonstrating natural synchronization. They exchanged a weighted glance, mutual understanding of implications requiring no verbalization. If the dimensional boundaries currently failing had been established during prehistory, specifically to separate divine and draconic realms, the current crisis represented far more profound disruption than previously understood. We need to see what's below, Issei concluded, returning his attention to the concealed entrance. These wards are designed for controlled access rather than absolute prohibition. They recognize specific magical signatures and permit corresponding entities. Medusa studied the authentication components, identifying the permission parameters. Divinity recognition patterns, she confirmed. They would permit passage to beings with divine essence regardless of current status or alignment. Which would include you, Issei noted, glancing at her with understanding rather than judgment. Despite your transformation, your fundamental essence retains divine components. These wards would recognize that original nature. His phrasing struck Medusa with unexpected force. Most beings who knew her true identity focused exclusively on her monstrous transformation, treating her divine origins as irrelevant history. Issei's acknowledgement of her fundamental essence, recognition that the monster had once been goddess, and something of that divinity remained. Despite curses and transformation, revealed perceptiveness few had demonstrated in millennia of her existence. Yes, she acknowledged, the single syllable containing complexities she rarely verbalized. Though greatly diminished, certain divine patterns remain recognizable within my saint graph. And my draconic components should satisfy the secondary authentication parameters, Issei added, indicating different symbols within the ward structure. These specifically reference draconic essence rather than full dragon entities. Hybrid forms like mine would qualify while pure dragons might actually be rejected. Together they approached the concealed entrance, each placing one hand upon specific sections of the ward pattern where their respective magical signatures would register most effectively. The ancient protection system responded immediately, symbols illuminating with soft golden light that spread throughout the pattern like liquid flowing through previously invisible channels. The overgrowth concealing the entrance withdrew through some mechanical or magical automation, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. Lanterns positioned along the stairway ignited spontaneously, flames burning with unnatural steadiness that suggested magical sustainability rather than conventional combustion. Automatic activation after authentication, Issei observed with professional appreciation. These systems have maintained functionality for millennia without apparent degradation. Divine construction methods often incorporated perpetual maintenance enchantments, Medusa explained as they began descending the revealed stairway. The temples of my era were designed to endure across ages without human intervention. The stairway extended deeper than surface architect. Ewer would suggest, continuing downward through natural stone that gradually transitioned to worked masonry of increasingly sophisticated design. The air remained surprisingly fresh despite the subterranean depth, suggesting ventilation systems operating alongside the illumination enchantments. After descending approximately 40 meters, they reached a landing where the narrow stairway opened into a much larger chamber. Both paused at this threshold, taking moments to absorb the unexpected scale of what lay before them. The underground complex extended far beyond reasonable expectations, a vast temple structure that should have been impossible beneath modern Fuyuki without previous discovery. Massive columns supported a ceiling adorned with astronomical patterns rendered in materials that glowed with soft luminescence. The floor featured intricate mosaic designs depicting entities from multiple mythological traditions interacting in scenes Medusa recognized from pre-Olympian histories. Most significant was the chamber's central feature, a perfect circular pool approximately 10 meters in diameter, filled with liquid that defied easy classification. It resembled water in basic RTIES but demonstrated subtle movement patterns suggesting consciousness rather than mere fluid dynamics. Its surface occasionally rippled without external stimulation, forming patterns briefly resembling symbols before returning to apparent placidity. A seeing pool, Medusa identified with rare reverence. I encountered only historical references to such constructs. They were supposedly created during the Age of Gods to monitor dimensional boundaries and communicate across separated realms. Issei approached the pool with appropriate caution, his expression revealing deep fascination beneath disciplined restraint. The liquid composition doesn't match any conventional material, he noted, crouching near the edge without actually touching the surface. It exists partially across dimensional frequencies, simultaneously present in multiple realities. Perfect for observing convergence patterns, Medusa concluded, joining him beside the ancient artifact. This facility was likely constructed specifically to monitor dimensional stability. They studied the chamber further, noting additional features that supported this assessment. The walls contained recessed alcoves housing crystalline objects of various configurations, each emitting distinctive energy signatures that Medusa's servant senses interpreted as dimensional frequency markers. Worktables positioned at measured intervals featured instruments combining familiar components with utterly alien mechanisms. A research facility disguised as a temple, Issei suggested, examining one particular workstation without disturbing its contents. Or perhaps religious veneration and scientific investigation weren't separated concepts when this was constructed. The distinction between science and religion is relatively modern, Medusa confirmed, recalling how differently knowledge had been categorized during her original existence. Divine mysteries were studied through disciplined methodology while maintaining appropriate reverence. As they continued exploring the chamber, Medusa noticed something that had initially escaped her attention. The dimensional stability within this subterranean complex significantly exceeded even her expectations. While the surface world experienced progressive deterioration, this facility maintained almost perfect boundary integrity despite housing technologies specifically designated to observe across those same boundaries. The containment architecture is extraordinary, she observed, indicating subtle structural elements integrated throughout the chamber. These weren't merely designed to observe dimensional boundaries but actively reinforce them from structural collapse. Issei nodded, having clearly noticed the same phenomenon. Which raises the question of why this facility hasn't extended that stabilization to the surrounding area. The technology clearly exists to prevent convergence, yet Fuyuki continues experiencing accelerating deterioration. The question hung between them as they approached the chamber's far end, where a massive stone doorway stood partially open. Beyond this threshold lay another chamber of similar scale but dramatically different purpose. Where the first space clearly served research and observation functions, this second chamber was unquestionably designed for ritualistic applications. A circular platform occupied the center, surrounded by 7 equidistant pillars arranged in perfect heptagonal formation. Each pillar featured distinct symbolic language that Medusa recognized as representing different pantheons: Olympian, Norse, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Hindu, Chinese, and one script so ancient even her extensive knowledge failed to identify its specific origin. Most notably, the platform itself contained inlaid symbols, combining divine and draconic elements in formations suggesting cooperative rather than adversarial relationship. These patterns directly contradicted most mythological accounts describing dragons and gods as natural enemies engaged in perpetual conflict. Historical revision, Issei noted softly, clearly reaching similar conclusions as he studied these unexpected depictions. Most mythologies portray dragons as chaotic enemies that divine heroes must overcome. These symbols suggest partnership rather than opposition. Winners write history, Medusa replied, the observation carrying person. I'll wait given how thoroughly her own story had been rewritten to serve Olympian narratives. If certain factions prevailed in ancient conflicts, they would naturally reframe previous cooperation as always existing enmity. They moved further into the ritual chamber, discovering additional evidence supporting this revisionist interpretation. Ceremonial objects displayed reverent integration of both divine and draconic elements. Historical records inscribed on wall panels described collaborative efforts addressing dimensional instabilities similar to current convergence patterns. Most significant was a massive mural extending across the chamber's far wall, a detailed depiction of divine and draconic entities working together to establish what appeared to be the original dimensional boundaries separating their respective realms. The artwork portrayed this separation not as punishment or containment but as mutual protection against some greater threat represented by abstract darkness encroaching from beyond established reality. This contradicts everything modern mythology teaches about primordial conflicts, Issei observed, studying the mural with intense focus. If dragons and Vine beings originally cooperated to establish dimensional boundaries protecting against external threats. Then current mythological frameworks represent deliberate propaganda rather than historical reality, Medusa completed. Finding unexpected validation in this evidence of historical revision. Her own experience with Olympian retelling of her transformation suddenly represented merely one instance of much broader pattern manipulation. As they contemplated these revelations, the seeing pool in the previous chamber suddenly emitted soft luminescence that spread throughout the complex. Oath immediately returned to investigate this activation, arriving as the pool's surface began forming distinct patterns rather than random movements. The liquid now displayed what appeared to be real-time observations of Fuyuki's surface, specifically focusing on areas experiencing severe dimensional deterioration. Multiple locations appeared simultaneously across the pool's surface, each surrounded by analytical symbols providing detailed assessment of convergence progression at that specific site. It's actively monitoring the current crisis, Issei realized, carefully studying the information ion without touching the mysterious liquid. These readings match what the Gremory monitoring systems detected but with significantly greater detail and dimensional layering. Medusa examined the symbolic language accompanying these observations, recognizing certain elements despite their archaic formulation. Warning indicators, she identified, indicating specific symbols appearing with increasing frequency across multiple monitored locations. The system is detecting pattern recognition consistent with catastrophic failure parameters. Before they could discuss implications further, the pool's surface shifted again, now displaying a specific location Medusa immediately recognized as the mountain shrine where they had planned to meet Rias and her team later that morning. The imagery showed concerning developments. Multiple dimensional tiers surrounding the shrine grounds, with what appeared to be entities attempting to breach through from another reality. The eastern mountain shrine is under attack, Issei stated, already moving toward the chamber exit. Those breach attempts show distinctive fallen angel energy signatures but with corruption patterns similar to Raziel's hybrid modifications. Medusa matched his urgent pace as they headed toward the exit stairway. The shrine maintains boundary seals for this region, she noted, recalling information from Fuyuki's leyline configuration. If those seals are compromised while dimensional stability continues deteriorating, catastrophic cascading failure becomes inevitable, Issei confirmed grimly. We need to reach that location immediately and provide reinforcement. They ascended the ancient stairway with supernatural speed, emerging into daylight that revealed several hours had passed during their subterranean exploration. Temporal distortion suggesting the temple complex existed partially outside normal time flow. The morning had advanced well beyond dawn, approaching midday beneath a sky now visibly affected by dimensional instability. What should have been clear blue instead displayed occasional translucent areas where other atmospheric conditions briefly became visible before fading back to apparent normalcy. Conventional travel will take too long, Issei assessed, the crimson sigil on his hand pulsing with increased intensity as he prepared more substantial draconic manifestation. The Mount Toin Shrine is approximately 20 kilometers from our current position. Medusa calculated options with tactical efficiency. My servant speed could traverse that distance in approximately 7 minutes, assuming deteriorating dimensional conditions don't create navigational obstacles, which they almost certainly will, Issei noted, his expression revealing decision formation. There's a faster option, though it requires temporary suspension of certain personal boundaries. Understanding formed immediately in Medusa's analytical mind. Your draconic transportation capabilities would accommodate two beings rather than one alone. Issei nodded, watching her reaction carefully. The boosted gear's second liberation form provides flight capabilities significantly exceeding conventional limitations. However, the energy field would need to encompass both of us in close proximity. The unspoken consideration hung between them. Such transportation would require physical contact maintained throughout the journey. For most beings, such pragmatic necessity would present no significant concern. But for Medusa, whose existence had been defined by isolation enforced through both external rejection and internal protective distancing, physical proximity carried weightier implications. She assessed the situation with characteristic efficiency. Tactical necessity outweighs personal preference, she stated simply. The shrine's boundary seals take priority over individual comfort considerations. Something in Issei's expression suggested he understood more than her words directly see. Onvade. Recognition of what such acceptance actually represented beyond mere practical concession. I'll maintain minimum manifestation to reduce potential discomfort, he offered, preparing the transformation with evident consideration for her boundaries. Boosted gear. Second liberation, he stated, crimson light enveloping his left arm as the dragon-scaled gauntlet expanded into more substantive armor covering his entire arm and portions of his torso. The transformation continued with controlled precision, manifesting armored components that provided necessary capabilities without complete draconic conversion. Open double-angle bracket boost. Boost. Close double-angle bracket. Ddrake's voice emerged from the transformed gauntlet, power visibly accumulating around Issei's form as translucent crimson wings materialized with greater substantiality than their previous transportation configuration. When the transformation stabilized, Issei extended his right hand toward her, notably not the armored left with its potentially intimidating draconic appearance. The gesture contained both invitation and respect, allowing her to establish contact according to her comfort rather than imposing proximity. Medusa hesitated only momentarily before accepting the offered hand. Her fingers closed around his with deliberate control, firm enough to maintain necessary connection while carefully moderating strength that could crush mortal bones without conscious restraint. The energy field will extend around both of us during flight, Issei explained, his voice carrying reassurance without condescension. It might feel unusual initially but causes no adverse effects to non-draconic entities. As he completed this explanation, the crimson energy surrounding his partial transformation expanded outward, enveloping Medusa in a field that felt surprisingly warm rather than uncomfortable. The sensation reminded her distantly of divine auras from her earliest existence, protective energy that sheltered rather than constrained. Without further discussion, Issei secured his arm around her waist with professional restraint, providing necessary stability while maintaining respectful positioning. The wings extended to their full configuration, and they launched skyward with acceleration that would have incapacitated ordinary humans. Medusa's servant physiology adjusted instantly to these forces, her body automatically compensating for sudden velocity changes. They ascended rapidly above Fuyuki, the city shrinking beneath them as Issei oriented toward the eastern mountains where the shrine awaited. From this elevation, the dimensional deterioration became starkly visible, entire sections of the landscape occasionally flickering to reveal alternative versions or completely different environments before returning to apparent normalcy. The convergence has accelerated significantly since yesterday, Issei observed, his voice carrying clearly despite their speed through a combination of the energy field's properties and his controlled draconic transformation. These manifestation patterns indicate boundary collapse approaching critical threshold in multiple locations simultaneously. Medusa noted how the deterioration formed specific patterns rather than random distribution. Deliberate targeting, she concluded, indicating particular convergence formations. These configurations focus on locations with existing spiritual significance. Shrines, temples, and natural power nexus points experience accelerated deterioration compared to neutral areas. Issei nodded, adjusting their trajectory to maintain optimal distance from the most severely affected regions, suggesting intelligence behind the pattern rather than natural progression. Something is directing the convergence toward specific objectives. Raziel CL, aimed accomplices across multiple dimensions, Medusa reminded him. His neutralization may have removed one implementation vector without addressing the broader conspiracy. Their flight path now read them over Fuyuki's outlying regions toward the forested mountains beyond. The dimensional distortions intensified as they approached their destination, evidence that the mountain shrine represented a primary target in whatever deliberate pattern was emerging. Issei suddenly adjusted their course with sharp precision, narrowly avoiding what appeared to be a localized dimensional collapse directly in their path. Where stable airspace had existed moments before, reality itself now distorted into a swirling vortex of competing dimensional frequencies. Artificial tear formation, he identified, banking away from several additional distortions manifesting around them. These aren't natural convergence effects, they're being generated specifically to obstruct aerial approach to the shrine. Medusa analyzed the tactical situation with instant comprehension. Deliberate containment strategy. Someone is isolating the shrine while simultaneously attacking its boundary seals. Precisely, Issei confirmed, his expression hardening as he maneuvered through increasingly complex obstacle patterns. They're creating aerial deterrence while ground forces attempt to breach the shrine's protections. As they approached within 5 kilometers of their destination, the obstruction pattern intensified beyond reasonable navigation parameters. Dimensional tiers now formed continuous barriers across all viable approach vectors, effectively isolating the shrine from external reinforcement. Direct approach has become impractical, Issei assessed, temporarily holding position beyond the containment perimeter. Even draconic transportation can't safely navigate tiers of that density without risking dimensional shearing. Medusa studied the obstruction pattern, her strategic mind identifying a potential alternative. The formation prioritizes aerial containment but shows reduced density along the northeastern ridge line. A ground approach through that sector might bypass primary containment measures. Issei followed her indication, analyzing the suggested vector with evident appreciation for her tactical assessment. Good observation. The dimensional tear configuration does show approximately 30% reduced density along that approach. Still dangerous but potentially navigable. Without requiring further discussion, he adjusted their course toward the identified vulnerability. Descending toward the forested ridgeline where containment measures appeared weakest. As they approached, Medusa noted subtle details confirming her tactical assessment, the dimensional Rs along this vector displayed formation patterns suggesting hasty implementation rather than planned deployment. This section was established as afterthought rather than primary containment, she observed, suggesting whoever created this barrier prioritized other approach vectors based on anticipated reinforcement sources. They expected primary response from Fuyuki City Center where the Gremory facility operates. Issei concluded, navigating through narrowing gaps between dimensional distortions. This northeastern approach wasn't considered high probability for intervention. They descended through final barrier layers with precise maneuvering, Issei's control of their trajectory demonstrating exceptional skill navigating dimensional anomalies. Upon reaching sufficient proximity to the forested ground, he dissolved the flight manifestation to transition to ground approach, maintaining the protective energy field while landing with controlled deceleration. Once safely on the forest floor, Issei released the supportive arm around Medusa's waist and stepped back to respectful distance, the energy field contracting to encompass only his partially transformed form. The conside, rate restoration of personal space without verbal emphasis demonstrated natural understanding of her preferences regarding proximity. The shrine lies approximately 2 kilometers through this forest, he stated. Orientation already established through enhanced senses. Ground approach should remain viable assuming containment patterns maintain current configuration. Medusa adjusted to terrestrial movement with instant adaptation, her servant capabilities allowing seamless transition between transportation modes. Lead position or trailing? She inquired, establishing tactical formation with efficient brevity. Alternating point, Issei suggested. Your servant perception specializes in conceptual threats while my draconic senses better detect dimensional anomalies. Rotating lead posit. Ion maximizes combined detection capabilities. The logical proposal highlighted again their natural tactical compatibility. Without requiring extensive coordination discussions that most operational partnerships demanded, they established complementary positioning and began advancing through the forest with synchronous movement patterns. Their progress revealed increasing evidence of dimensional instability affecting the natural environment. Vegetation displayed occasional phase shifting, trees momentarily transforming into alternative species before returning to original configuration. Small wildlife exhibited behavioral anomalies consistent with sensory confusion caused by overlapping realities. Most concerning were periodic areas where natural materials had permanently transformed rough dimensional bleeding, rocks displaying impossible crystalline structures, plants growing in configurations defying conventional biology, Earth itself demonstrating altered compositional properties where different dimensional frequencies had temporarily merged. Dimensional harmonization has begun in isolated locations, Issei observed as they passed a section of forest where trees had merged with crystalline formations from another reality. These permanent transformations indicate boundary collapse reaching synchronization threshold rather than merely temporary breaching. C. Consistent with catastrophic convergence progression, Medusa confirmed, recalling similar manifestations described in ancient texts regarding dimensional collapse events. When harmonization becomes self-sustaining rather than merely fluctuating, complete convergence acceleration becomes exponential. They maintained urgent pace while carefully navigating areas of more severe dimensional instability. As they approached within 1 kilometer of the shrine, sounds of conflict became audible even without enhanced senses, magical discharges, structured invocations, and distinctive impacts of supernatural entities engaging in direct combat. Their advance brought them to the forest's edge, providing first visual confirmation of the situation at the mountain shrine. The scene justified their urge. NT response. Multiple dimensional tiers surrounded the shrine grounds, each serving as entry point for entities attempting to breach the location's ancient defenses. The shrine itself occupied a natural plateau approximately 100 meters in diameter, surrounded by traditional Japanese boundary markers significantly enhanced with visible protection magic. At the complex's center stood the main shrine building, a structure combining traditional architecture with distinctive modifications suggesting specialized functionality beyond religious observance. Most notable was the defensive barrier surrounding the entire compound, a translucent dome of golden energy maintaining separation between the shrine grounds and the dimensional tiers attempting to breach its perimeter. This barrier emanated from a figure standing at the shrine's central courtyard, a woman whose traditional Miko attire contrasted with the 9 golden fox tails visible behind her humanoid form. Yusaka, Issei identified, recognizing the yokai leader they had encountered during the confrontation with Raziel. Maintaining boundary integrity through kitsune arts while under simultaneous attack from multiple vectors. Medusa assessed the tactical situation with experienced efficiency. Approximately 17 distinct entities attempting breach through 7-dimensional tiers. Attack pattern suggests coordinated assault rather than opportunistic convergence exploitation. The attacking entities defied simple classification. Each appeared fundamentally humanoid but displayed corrupted modifications similar to Raziel's hybrid transformation. Some featured partial angelic characteristics combined with draconic elements, others displayed devil components integrated with unknown dimensional materials. All emanated disturbing energy signatures suggesting forced transformation rather than natural evolution. Hybrid entities created through same process Raziel employed, Issei confirmed, the boosted gear responding to his heightened combat readiness by extending additional armor components across his form. They're attacking the shrine specifically to disable regional boundary seals maintained at this location. As they prepared intervention strategy, a new dimensional tear suddenly manifested directly above the shrine, larger and more stable than surrounding breaches. From this carefully structured opening emerged a figure Medusa instantly recognized despite having seen only once previously, Rias Gremory, accompanied by her queen and another devil Medusa hadn't encountered before. The Gremory team bypassed the containment barrier, Issei observed with evident approval, likely using family-specific teleportation magic modified to navigate dimensional obstruction patterns. The devils immediately joined Yusaka's defensive efforts, Rias deploying her power of destruction against entities nearest to breaching the barrier while her queen established secondary containment protocols around the shrine's central structure. The third devil, a bespectacled young woman with short dark hair, implemented what appeared to be mathematical formulations that temporarily stabilized fluctuating sections of Yusaka's protective barrier. Defensive coordination but numerical disadvantage, Medusa assessed, already calculating optimal intervention vectors. The hybrid entities employ dimensional phasing techniques that conventional combat methods can't effectively counter. Issei nodded grimly, completing his partial transformation as the boosted gear extended to its combat configuration. We need to neutralize the dimensional tiers rather than engaging entities individually. Eliminating their access points forces confrontation under more favorable conditions. Seal the breaches rather than defend against what emerges. Medusa translated, appreciating the strategic approach that addressed fundamental cause rather than merely responding to symptoms. My noble phantasm can temporarily petrify conceptual pathways if properly directed, while draconic energy can collapse the tiers permanently once their structural integrity is compromised. Issei completed their tactical planning again, demonstrating natural synchronization. We target tiers sequentially beginning with the northeastern quadrant where attack concentration appears heaviest. With strategy established, they advanced from forest cover toward the embattled shrine. Their appearance drew immediate attention from both defenders and attackers, Rias visibly registering their arrival with evident relief while several hybrid entities redirected their efforts to intercept this new threat. 3 corrupted beings, each displaying partial fallen angel characteristics merged with distinctly reptilian modifications, moved to engage them before they could reach the shrine's protective barrier. These entities employed light-based weapons reminiscent of standard fallen angel armaments but modified with dimensional phasing capabilities that allowed partial circumvention of conventional defenses. Medusa responded with characteristic efficiency, her chain daggers extending with supernatural precision to entangle the nearest attacker. The weapons, conceptual properties, extensions of her mythological identity rather than merely physical implements, allowed them to affect the hybrid entity despite its dimensional phasing attempts. Simultaneously, Issei engaged the remaining 2 attackers with controlled application of draconic power. Rather than excessive force that might further destabilize dimensional boundaries, he employed precisely calibrated dragon shots that targeted specific vulnerabilities in the entity's hybrid composition. Their integration is imperfect, he called to Medusa as his attack disrupted one entity's phasing capability, forcing it into singular dimensional frequency where conventional combat methods became effective. Target the junction points between different component types. Medusa immediately adjusted her attack pattern based on this tactical information, her daggers now striking precisely where angelic and reptilian elements imperfectly merged within her opponent's form. The entity emitted distorted screeching as these connection points fractured under her targeted assault, its previously coordinated movements deteriorating into spasmodic disarray. Their initial engagement concluded efficiently, 3 hybrid attackers neutralized through coordinated effort requiring minimal communication. This combat effectiveness drew appreciative assessment from the shrine's defenders. As Issei and Medusa approached the protective barrier, Yusaka acknowledged their arrival with formal nod while maintaining her concentration on the boundary maintenance. Dragon merged 1, she Gray. ETED Issei before shifting her attention briefly to Medusa. And Gorgon servant, your intervention is timely though unexpected. We observed the attack through ancient monitoring systems, Issei explained succinctly. Already analyzing the barrier's composition to determine optimal entry method without compromising its integrity. The temple complex beneath Western Fuyuki remains operational despite surface deterioration. This information visibly surprised both Yusaka and Rias, though neither allowed tactical response to be delayed by academic curiosity. The Gremory heir approached the barrier's edge, momentarily modifying its composition to permit their entry without external breach vulnerability. The attack began approximately 20 minutes ago, Rias informed them as they entered the protected perimeter. 17-dimensional tiers manifested simultaneously around the shrine's boundary, each serving as entry point for these hybrid entities. They're targeting the 7 seals of boundaries, added the bespectacled devil, adjusting her glasses with precise movement as she maintained complex mathematical formulations supporting the barrier's integrity. This shrine houses one of the original anchoring points establishing separation between major dimensional planes. Sona Citri, Issei identified with respectful acknowledgement. Your analytical reputation appears well deserved. Those calculations incorporate reality coefficient adjustments I've only seen in theoretical applications. The devil, Sona, responded with professional nod, though Medusa detected subtle appreciation for recognized expertise beneath her composed exterior. Theoretical until necessity demands practical implementation, she replied before returning attention to immediate tactical concerns. 3 seals have already experienced partial degradation. If all 7 fail, this entire region experiences immediate catastrophic convergence. Show me the seal configuration, Issei requested, his expression reflecting focused determination rather than alarm despite the dire assessment. Yusaka gestured toward the central shrine building without interrupting her boundary maintenance. The primary seal matrix occupies the inner sanctuary. These exterior attacks represent distraction rather than their actual objective. They've already infiltrated the interior, Medusa stated rather than asked, her servant senses detecting disruption patterns inconsistent with merely external assault. At least one entity breached defensive parameters before the barrier deployed completely. Rias confirmed this assessment with grim nod. A specialized infiltration type penetrated initial defenses during barrier establishment. Akeno and Kaneko are currently engaging it within the seal chamber, B. Its dimensional phasing capabilities make conventional combat largely ineffective. We need to address both exterior containment and interior breach simultaneously, Issei concluded, tactical assessment requiring minimal deliberation. Medusa and I can neutralize the dimensional tiers while you maintain boundary integrity. Once external access points are eliminated, we can reinforce interior defense against the infiltration entity. Quote, the proposal represented logical division of capabilities based on specific expertise. Yusaka and the Devils possessed specialized knowledge regarding the shrine's defensive systems, while Issei and Medusa had demonstrated effective countermeasures against dimensional breaches during their arrival engagement. Agreed, Rias confirmed without hierarchical hesitation despite her leadership position. We'll maintain the barrier while coordinating with Akeno's team inside. Focus on closing those tiers systematically rather than engaging entities unless absolutely necessary. With strategy established, they separated to implement their assigned functions. Issei and Medusa exited through controlled opening in the protective barrier, immediately moving toward the northeastern quadrant where dimensional tear concentration appeared highest. 3 primary tiers in this sector, Medusa noted as they approached the first breach point. Each demonstrate distinct formation characteristics suggesting specialized creation rather than natural convergence exploitation. Deliberate breach methodology, Issei agreed, studying the dimensional tear's street rupture with draconic senses that perceived underlying composition invisible to conventional observation. These weren't created through Raziel's techniques but display similar hybridization principle, combining multiple dimensional frequencies. They positioned themselves strategically, Medusa preparing her mystical eye's limited application while Issei gathered specific draconic energy designed to collapse dimensional pathways. The breach before them pulsed with erratic energy as additional hybrid entities prepared to emerge from whatever reality existed beyond. I'll petrify the conceptual framework, Medusa stated, carefully removing her mystic blindfold while maintaining precise control over her petrification ability. The dimensional pathway will temporarily solidify into singular frequency state vulnerable to directed collapse. Target acquisition confirmed, Issei acknowledged, the boosted gear pulsing with accumulated energy as he prepared the precisely calibrated attack necessary for clean breach closure rather than chaotic collapse. Medusa activated her noble phantasm with carefully controlled application, not the full implementation that would indiscriminately petrify all within visual range, but precisely directed effect targeting the dimensional tear's conceptual structure. Her mystical eyes glowed with supernatural power as the breach's amorphous boundaries denly crystallized into solid configuration, its previously fluid dimensional frequencies locked temporarily into stable formation. Pathway petrified, she confirmed, replacing her blindfold with practiced efficiency. Structural integrity temporarily unified across dimensional boundaries. Issei immediately implemented the second phase of their coordinated technique. Dragon Seal, he intoned, directing concentrated energy through the boosted gear directly into the now vulnerable breach. The crimson power flowed into the petrified dimensional pathway, systematically collapsing its structure from periphery inward. The dimensional tear contracted rapidly under this combined assault, its previously stable opening diminishing to residual fracture before sealing completely with audible reality normalizing sound. Where chaotic breach had existed moments before, normal space now appeared fully restored without visible distortion. One down, Issei noted with professional satisfaction rather than celebration. 6 remaining with highest priority on the northwestern formation currently generating largest entity throughput. They proceeded systematically around the shrine's perimeter, applying their coordinated technique to each dimensional tear encountered. The hybrid entities emerging from these breaches attempted increasingly desperate countermeasures as they recognized the methodical elimination of their access points, but neither Medusa nor Issei allowed these distractions to disrupt their primary objective. After neutralizing the 5th dimensional tear, they encountered more substantial resistance. A particularly massive hybrid entity, its form combining unmistakable devil characteristics with draconic modifications far more extensively integrated than previous opponents. emerged fully before they could implement their sealing technique. Seal breaker. The entity identified itself, its voice carrying harmonic distortion suggesting multiple beings speaking simultaneously through shared vocal apparatus. Your interference patterns were anticipated, though not on this precise timeline. Unlike previous hybrid entities that attacked with straightforward aggression, this being demonstrated tactical assessment before engagement. Its eyes, vertically slitted with distinctive devil luminescence, studied them with calculating intelligence rather than mindless hostility. Integration level exceeds previous encounters, Issei observed quietly to Medusa, the boosted gear responding to elevated threat assessment with additional armor manifestation. This entity achieved substantially higher synchronization between component types. Genuine consciousness retention rather than merely functional hybridization, Medusa agreed, noting the significant difference between this opponent and previous hybrid entities that had displayed primarily instinctual behavior patterns, suggesting voluntary transformation rather than forced modification. The entity, Seal B. Reeker, seemed to appreciate their analytical assessment rather than resenting the objective evaluation. Perceptive observations, it acknowledged with disturbing politeness. Willing synchronized TRA-NS formation indeed produces superior results compared to forced hybridization protocols. You're deliberately destroying dimensional boundaries, Issei stated, neither question nor accusation but simple confirmation of obvious intent. Why? The convergence threatens all realities equally once cascading failure reaches critical threshold. Seal Breaker's expression shifted to something resembling genuine confusion at the question. Destruction implies absence of purpose, it responded, actual bewilderment evident in its harmonic voice. We seek restoration of natural unified state rather than perpetuation of artificial separation. Quote, this response echoed Raziel's earlier statements regarding dimensional boundaries representing unnatural division rather than necessary protection. The consistency suggested coordinated philosophical foundation rather than merely shared tactical objectives, evidence of genuine movement with developed ideology rather than opportunistic alliance. Natural unified state, Medusa repeated with subtle skepticism. Convenient terminology for catastrophic dimensional collapse that eliminates distinct existence parameters for billions of beings across affected realities. Temporary disorientation preceding transcendent reconfiguration, Seal Breaker corrected with disturbing certainty. Individual consciousness constructs will reorganize according to natural harmonic resonance patterns once artificial frequency separations dissolve. The entity's genuine belief in this outcome represented more concerning threat than mere destructive intent. Ideologue. ICAL conviction driving calculated methodology presented substantially more dangerous opposition than simple nihilistic destruction. You can't possibly know that, Issei challenged, though his tone suggested engagement with the entity's position rather than dismissive rejection. No historical precedent exists for convergence event of this magnitude resolving into stable unified reality. All documented cases resulted in complete dissolution of affected dimensional planes. Seal Breaker's response carried surprising patience given the fundamental opposition represented by their respective positions. Documented cases observed specific limited convergence events rather than coordinated systematic boundary dissolution. Our approach incorporates stabilization parameters absent from natural or accidental convergence incidents. Before this philosophical exchange could continue, reality itself intervened with concerning development. The remaining dimensional tiers surrounding the shrine suddenly pulsed with synchronized energy, each expanding approximately 20% beyond previous parameters. From the shrine's interior, visible energy fluctuations suggested the protective seals were experiencing critical instability beyond defensive countermeasures. Debate becomes academic, Medusa observed with characteristic pragmatism. The convergence acceleration has reached self-sustaining threshold requiring immediate intervention regardless of philosophical positioning. Issei nodded sharply, tactical necessity overriding intellectual engagement despite genuine interest in understanding the opposition's perspective. We need to neutralize this entity quickly and complete the breach sealing before interior seal degradation reaches irreversible parameters. Seal Breaker AP apparently recognized their shift from conversation to combat readiness, its own posture adjusting accordingly. Regrettable, it stated with what appeared genuine disappointment. Your unique existence AL configurations would have provided valuable perspective within unified reality framework. The entity attacked without further preamble, not with crude physical assault but precisely calibrated dimensional manipulation targeting the space immediately surrounding them. Reality itself distorted as Sealbreaker implemented advanced variation of the phasing technique employed by lesser hybrid entities, attempting to selectively alter their dimensional frequency to disrupt biological cohesion. Medusa responded with servant-class speed, her chain daggers extending to create conceptual boundary around their immediate position. The weapons, mythological properties, extensions of her divine monstrous nature, provided temporary protection against dimensional manipulation by establishing fixed conceptual reference point regardless of spatial distortion. Simultaneously, Issei countered the attack's fundamental methodology through draconic adaptation. Dragon Anchor, he stated, the boosted gear, pulsing as it implemented specialized technique designed specifically for maintaining dimensional stability during convergence events. His existence, already spanning multiple dimensional frequencies, through his hybrid nature, expanded this natural capability to establish localized stability field. Their coordinated defense neutralized Sealbreaker's initial attack, forcing the entity to reassess its approach. Rather than immediately attempting alternative offensive technique, it studied their countermeasures with analytical interest that further distinguished it from lesser hybrid entities. Fascinating complementary defensive methodology, it observed, genuine academic appreciation evident despite adversarial context. Conceptual fixation through mythological constant combined with multi-spectral frequency anchoring through draconic extension. Individually vulnerable but collectively comprehensive. This accurate assessment of their defensive techniques' fundamental principles demonstrated concerning level of technical understanding. Sealbreaker represented not merely powerful opponent but knowledgeable practitioner with comprehensive grasp of dimensional mechanics underlying the convergence crisis. It's stalling, Medusa realized, recognition forming as she noted subtle energy fluctuations around the remaining dimensional tiers. These exchanges serve to maintain our engagement here while additional assets deploy elsewhere. Issei immediately confirmed her tactical assessment, his draconic senses detecting increasing activity within the dimensional breaches they hadn't yet sealed. The remaining tiers are being structurally reinforced from their origination side. Someone is implementing stabilization protocols to prevent our sealing technique from succeeding. Understanding their disadvantaged tactical position, they exchanged brief glances that communicated shared strategic adjustment without requiring verbal coordination. Their natural combat synchronization again manifested through complementary response to emerging threat parameters. Break engagement and prioritize remaining tiers, Issei suggested, already gathering energy for more substantial application than their previous methodical approach had required. We implement simultaneous neutralization rather than sequential closure. Medusa nodded once, immediately adjusting her position to optimize coverage of multiple dimensional tiers simultaneously. Her chain daggers extended to their maximum operational range, prepared to implement wide-area conceptual petrification rather than precisely targeted application. Sealbreaker recognized their tactical adjustment with evident concern, its previous academic interest replaced by operational urgency. Concurrent neutralization attempt detected, it stated, though the communication seemed directed beyond their immediate confrontation rather than addressing them directly. Priority targets implementing synchronized breach collapse methodology. The entity abandoned its previous measured engagement approach, launching multiple simultaneous attacks designed to disrupt their positioning rather than directly damage their physical forms. Space itself distorted around them as Sealbreaker manipulated local dimensional parameters with concerning precision, creating localized gravity fluctuations, temporal acceleration pockets, and spatial compression zones in coordinated pattern. Despite these sophisticated interference techniques, Medusa and Issei maintained their operational focus on the primary objective. Rather than directly countering Sealbreaker's attacks, they adapted their movement patterns to incorporate these spatial distortions into their approach vectors toward the remaining dimensional tiers. Noble Phantasm, Breaker Gorgon, Self-Seal, Temple of Darkness, Medusa invoked, channeling substantially greater power than during previous controlled applications. Her mystic eyes glowed through her blindfold as Issei directed this enhanced implementation toward the dimensional tiers rather than any specific entity. The conceptual power of her noble phantasm, representation of her divine monstrous nature's fundum. Ental property, extended across multiple breaches simultaneously. Where previous applications had affected individual tiers with precise control, this expanded implementation sacrificed precision for comprehensive coverage. Complementing this wide area effect, Issei channeled draconic energy through fully manifested boosted gear configuration. Dragon Dominion. Boundary collapse, he stated, crims. On power flowing outward in carefully structured pattern designed to interact with Medusa's petrification effect rather than conflicting with its conceptual parameters. Open double angle bracket explosion, close double angle bracket. D-Drake's voice erged from the boosted gear as accumulated power released in synchronized burst timed perfectly with Medusa's noble phantasm reaching maximum expansion. The combined techniques created unprecedented effect. Medusa's petrification established momentary conceptual constant across all dimensional tiers simultaneously, while Issei's draconic energy collapsed these temporarily stabilized breaches through GH-coordinated dimensional frequency cancellation. All remaining tiers contracted simultaneously under this coordinated assault, their structures destabilizing from periphery inward until complete CL. Sure occurred with synchronized reality normalizing effect. Where chaotic dimensional breaches had existed moments before, normal space reasserted stable configuration across the shrine's entire perimeter. Seal Breaker's reaction demonstrated genuine alarm rather than merely tactical concern. Breach access terminated across all vectors, it stated with evident distress. Synchronization maintained. Ants impossible without continued dimensional pathway stability. The entity's form began displaying concerning deterioration, its previously stable hybrid composition now showing visible instability. As component elements began separating along their original dimensional frequency parameters, without active connection to whatever stabilization source had maintained its integrated existence, Seal B. Raker's artificial unified state could not sustain cohesion. Your transformation requires continuous external support, Issei observed, understanding forming as he witnessed the entity's accelerating decomposition. True integration hasn't been achieved despite advanced hybridization parameters. Temporary technological limitation, Seal Breaker responded, though its harmonic voice had begun displaying increasing distortion as component frequencies separated further. Future iterations will achieve self-sustaining unification once initial convergence establishes baseline harmonic resonance. Despite its deteriorating condition, the entity maintained tactical awareness regarding primary mission objectives. Rather than continuing futile engagement with them, Seal Breaker suddenly implemented dimensional displacement technique targeting the shrine's interior where the boundary seals remained vulnerable. It's redirecting toward the inner sanctuary, Medusa warned, already moving to intercept despite the entity's substantial head start. Attempting final objective completion before complete decomposition occurs. They pursued with maximum speed, entering the shrine building out traditional entrance rather than attempting dimensional displacement that might further destabilize the critically vulnerable seal matrix. The interior revealed evidence of recent conflict, structural damage consistent with engagement between Rias's peerage members and previous infiltration entities. Following the disturbance pattern, they quickly navigated to the inner sanctuary where the shrine's true purpose became immediately apparent. The chamber contained ancient seal configuration of extraordinary complexity, 7 distinct pillars arranged in precise heptagonal formation around central platform containing what appeared to be original dimensional boundary anchor point. Akino and Kaneko were visible within this chamber, both showing evidence of prolonged combat against difficult opposition. Between them lay damaged remains of hybrid entities similar to those they had encountered outside but with specialized configurations suggesting infiltration optimization rather than direct combat capability. Most concerning was the seal matrix itself. 4 of the 7 pillars displayed visible damage with energetic instability indicating critical function compromise. The remaining 3 maintained operation but showed increasing strain patterns as they attempted compensating for their damaged counterparts. Seal Breaker had already entered the chamber before their arrival, its reiterating form advancing directly toward the central platform where the dimensional anchor pulsed with increasingly erratic energy. Despite its ongoing decomposition, the entity maintained sufficient cohesion to potentially disrupt the anchor if allowed direct contact. Neutralize the hybrid, Akeno called upon noticing their arrival, her normally playful demeanor replaced by urgent tactical focus. The boundary anchor cannot withstand direct contact with dimensional disruption entity of that configuration. Without requiring additional explanation, Medusa and Issei moved to intercept Seal B. Reeker before it could reach the vulnerable central platform. Their approach vectors converged from opposite directions, creating no viable evasion route without abandoning its primary objective. Recognizing its tactical disadvantage, the hybrid entity made desperate decision, accelerating its own decomposition to release concentrated dimensional disruption energy directly toward the boundary anch. Or rather than attempting physical contact. This sacrifice strategy represented final mission completion attempt despite ensuring its own destruction in the process. Containment priority, Issei called, immediately adjusting his approach to intercept the energy discharge rather than the entity itself. The boosted gear flared with crimson light as he positioned himself between the destructive energy and its intended target. Dragon Shield. Maximum containment. The armor covering his left arm expanded rapidly, forming protective barrier specifically designed to contain dimensional energy rather than merely blocking physical force. The discharge struck this specialized defense with catastrophic intensity, dimensional frequencies colliding with reality-distorting effect that would have annihilated conventional protection instantly. Medusa simultaneously engaged Seal Breaker directly, preventing the deteriorating entity from implementing secondary attack vector while Issei contained the primary energy discharge. Her chain daggers struck with precision targeting remaining connection points maintaining the hybrid's tenuous cohesion. Under this coordinated assault, Seal Breaker's fin-al resistance collapsed along with its physical form. The entity's component elements separated completely, returning to their original dimensional frequencies without the artificial integration that had temporarily unified them into single being. The immediate threat neutralized, attention shifted to the boundary anchor and damaged seal pillars. Issei maintained containment around the intercepted energy discharge, preventing its dissipation into the surrounding environment where it might further damage the already compromised seal matrix. The boundary anchor is approaching critical instability, Akeno reported, her hands moving in complex patterns as she attempted stabilizing the fluctuating energy at the chamber's center. 3 primary seals have failed completely with 4th approaching terminal degradation parameters. The mountain leyline network is experiencing cascading failure, added Kaneko, her typically reserved expression showing genuine concern as she monitored external conditions through specialized sensory capabilities. Dimensional bleeding has accelerated exponentially throughout the region. The situation had deteriorated beyond conventional stabilization techniques. Even if they prevented further direct attacks against the shrine's seals, accumulated damage had already compromised the boundary system beyond standard repair parameters. At that critical moment, Yusaka entered the inner sanctuary accompanied by Rias and Sona. The 9-tailed fox leader moved directly to the central platform, her expression revealing grim determination rather than defeated acceptance despite the apparently hopeless situation. The boundary anchor can be stabilized, she stated with absolute certainty, but requires specialized implementation of yokai binding arts, combined with compatible external energy sources. Rias immediately grasped the implied methodology. You need power sources representing major dimensional planes affected by the convergence. Devils, dragons, divine entities. Precisely, Yusaka confirmed, already beginning preliminary preparation for whatever technique she intended implementing. The original boundary establishment required cooperative effort from representatives of each major dimensional frequency. Restoration demands similar contribution. A ritual to reinforce the boundary seal, Sona identified, her analytical min.D immediately processing theoretical foundations underlying the proposed approach. Using representatives of affected dimensions to establish resonance pattern the anchor can recognize as authorized modification parameters. Yusaka nodded once, her 9 tails extending to specific positions around the damaged seal configuration. The ritual requires personal sacrifice from each participant, not Fey essence but something carrying significant emotional resonance. The boundary anchor responds to authentic connection rather than merely superficial representation. The implication hung momentarily as each processed this requirement. Personal sacrifice of emotionally significant nature represented considerably more intimate contribution than merely providing magical energy or technical expertise. I will contribute Kitsune essence as regional guardian, Yusaka continued, removing an ornate hair ornament that visibly radiated personal significance beyond its material value. This artifact contains my first daughter's birth blessing, irreplaceable connection between generations of Kyoto guardians. The nine-tailed fox placed this precious object on the central platform, where the Bounda Ra anchor immediately responded with resonant energy that partially stabilized its fluctuating pattern. This demonstrated proof of concept. The approach functioned as Yusaka had claimed, though additional null contributions would be necessary for complete restoration. Rias stepped forward without hesitation, removing an elegant silver pendant from around her neck. Gremory family connection, she explained. Though reluctance to elaborate further suggested deeply personal significance beyond mere aristocratic representation. A reminder of obligations extending beyond personal desire. When this second contribution joined Yusaka's on the central platform, the boundary anchor's stability increased noticeably, two major dimensional frequencies now properly represented within the restoration matrix. However, the remaining damaged seals continued deteriorating despite this partial improvement. Devil and yokai essences established, Sona observed, her analytical assessment continuing despite increasingly urgent circumstances. Requiring dragon, divine, and human representatives to establish minimum viable frequency spectrum for functional restoration. Issei understood his role immediately, though determining appropriate contribution required momentary consideration. As both dragon-human hybrid and dimensional traveler, his unique existence potentially provided multiple required frequency representations simultaneously. After brief reflection, he removed a simple object from inner pocket, a seemingly ordinary house key attached to worn leather fob. Despite its mundane appearance, Medusa's servant senses detected profound emotional resonance emanating from this object. My family home in Kuo town, Issei explained quietly, the normally controlled emotions briefly visible in his expression. Last tangible connection to my life before the first convergence. As he placed this deeply personal artifact on the central platform, the boundary anchor responded with substantial street abilization effect, more significant than previous contributions due to the dual frequency nature of his existence providing multiple dimensional representations simultaneously. The restoration ritual had achieved significant progress but still required divine frequency representation to complete minimum viable spectrum. All eyes turned to Medusa, whose divine monstrous nature potentially satisfied this requirement despite her complicated relationship with divinity. Medusa faced momentary internal conflict invisible to most observers. Her existence as heroic spirit, fundamentally different from living beings, complicated the concept of possessing personally significant objects. Moreover, her transformation from goddess to monster had severed most connections to her divine past, while her Ns Strauss exile had permitted few meaningful attachments. After apparent consideration, her hand moved to her mystic blindfold, the conceptual representation of her monstrous curse and simultaneously our primary protection against inadvertently harming others. This object represented her entire complicated existence, both the divine beauty she had once embodied and the monstrous isolation that had defined her subsequent millennia. Divine essence corrupted but not eliminated, she stated with characteristic directness, removing the blindfold with careful control to prevent her petrifying gaze from affecting others. This represents both what was taken and what remains. As she placed the blindfold beside the other contributions, keeping her eyes carefully downcast, the boundary anchor respo. NDED with immediate resonance, divine frequency completing the minimum spectrum required for functional restoration. The damaged seals stabilized significantly, their deterioration halting as the center. AL platform began emitting structured energy patterns extending throughout the chamber. The connection matrix is forming, Yusaka observed with evident relief, her nine tails now glowing with golden light as she channeled specialized yokai energy into the developing ritual, but requires activation catalyst to implement complete restoration parameters. Blood sacrifice from each representative, Sona identified. Her academic knowledge allowing rapid recognition of ritual requirements. Living essence freely given as activation component. Without hesitation, each participant implemented his final requirement, Yusaka drawing small ceremonial blade across her palm, Rias employing specialized devil magic to extract measured blood quantity, Issei using the boosted gear's scaled edge to create precise incision. For Medusa, this process required additional consideration given her non-standard existence as heroic spirit rather than living entity. Conceptual essence rather than physical blood, she determined. Carefully collecting spiritual energy from her Saint Graph's outer boundary. This substance, neither fully physical nor entirely spiritual, represented the closest equivalent to living blood her servant existence could provide. When all four contributions converged on the central platform, the boundary anchor's response proved immediate and comprehensive. Structured energy erupted from the central point, flowing through ancient channels connecting all 7 seal pillars regardless of their previously damaged condition. The entire chamber illuminated with harmonic resonance. NCE as the dimensional boundary began active restoration process. The effect extended beyond the shrine itself, visible energy extending outward along leyline networks to reinforce dimensional boundaries throughout the surrounding region. Where reality had previously displayed concerning thinning between dimensional frequencies, proper separation reasserted with stabilizing effect that gradually extended further from the central anchor point. Boundary restoration achieving 60% effectiveness, Sona reported, monitoring the process through specialized calculation circles. Sufficient for temporary stabilization but requiring additional intervention to achieve permanent resolution. The convergence continues accelerating globally, Rias added, consulting communication circle connected to her research facility. This regional stabilization represents significant achievement but doesn't address the underlying catalyst maintaining convergence progression. The Holy Grail, Issei identified, having reached similar conclusion through independent analysis. Its fundamental function involves piercing dimensional boundaries to access the root, without modifying that primary operational parameter. Localized stabilization merely delays inevitable progression. As the ritual completed its initial implementation phase, each participant reclaimed their contributed artifacts, subtly modified through exposure to the boundary anchor's multidimensional energy. These objects had retained their fundamental nature while gaining additional properties connecting them to the restored boundary network. Medusa replaced her blindfold with practiced precision, though not before Issei briefly glimpsed her eyes in controlled peripheral vision. Rather than immediately petrifying as mythology suggested, her gaze conveyed complex emotional depth beneath their supernatural power, centuries of isolation, observation without participation, knowledge without connection. The moment SSED quickly as she secured the blindfold in its proper position, but something in that brief visual exchange seemed to establish deeper understanding between them than their previous combat coordination had achieved. Issei's expression suggested recognition of something significant in that momentary connection, though he maintained respectful silence regarding the inherently private nature of what he might have perceived. The ritual has bought us approximately 72 hours before dimensional degradation reaches critical parameters again, Yusaka stated, her assessment based on specialized knowledge as regional guardian. Without addressing the primary catalyst, even this reinforced boundary will eventually fail under continued convergence pressure. Then we focus on the Grail itself, Rias concluded. Practical leadership asserting priority over academic analysis of what they had accomplished. Its current configuration must be modified to terminate dimensional piercing functionality without compromising the ritual's fundamental structure. Requiring cooperation from remaining masters and servants, Sona added pragmatically. Many still believe they're participating in conventional Holy Grail war rather than existential preservation effort. Then we convince them, Issei stated with simple determination. Starting with those already aware of the dimensional crisis, and expanding outward through established connections. As they prepared to depart the now stabilized shrine, Medusa found herself reflecting on unexpected developments since her summoning into what should have been standard Holy Grail war. Instead of straightforward conflict for predetermined prize, she had become involved in multiversal preservation effort alongside beings from dimensions she previously hadn't known existed. Most unexpected was her evolving relationship with Issei Hyodo, a being whose existence challenged conventional classification systems yet demonstrated qualities Medusa had rarely encountered throughout her extensive existence: genuine acceptance of her complex nature, respect for her capabilities without fetishizing her monstrous aspects, and natural combat compatibility that suggested deeper resonance beyond mere tactical alignment. As they joined the others moving toward the shrine's exit, Issei briefly matched pace beside her. "Thank you," he said simply. The statement encompassing multiple levels of acknowledgement, particularly for sharing something so personally significant during the ritual. "I understand what the blindfold represents beyond mere practical function." Medusa maintained her characteristic reserve despite unexpected appreciation for his understanding. "You saw my eyes," she stated rather than asked, no accusation in her tone despite the potential significance of such exposure. Briefly, he confirmed without attempting deflection or denial. Dragon sight provides certain protections against conceptual effects like petrification, though I wouldn't test those limits unnecessarily. The honest response, neither boasting of immunity nor fearing her monstrous aspect, represented another example of his unusually balanced approach to her complicated existence. Unlike most beings who either feared her cursed nature or sought to exploit it, Issei simply acknowledged the reality of her condition while maintaining respectful boundaries. "They were beautiful," he added after brief hesitation, the statement delivered with simple sincerity rather than romantic intention. "Not despite what they represent but including that aspect of your existence." The unexpected observation caught Medusa momentarily without practiced response. Few beings had ever referenced her eyes as anything but instruments of horror since her divine transformation millennia ago. This straightforward acknowledgement of beauty remaining within monstrous curse represented perspective she had encountered perhaps twice in thousands of years. "Most find beauty incompatible with monstrosity," she finally responded, her typically measured voice carrying subtle vulnerability rarely permitted expression. "The transformation is generally considered absolute rather than complex integration." "Transformation is rarely absolute," Issei replied, unconscious reference to his own hybrid existence providing authentic understanding rather than mere philosophical position. "New aspects don't necessarily eliminate original nature so much as complicate its expression." This perspective, fundamentally aligned with her own experience yet rarely articulated by external sources, created momentary connection transcending their practical alliance against dimensional crisis. For perhaps the first time since her summoning, Medusa felt genuinely perceived rather than merely observed or utilized. The moment passed without requiring additional verbalization as they rejoined the others preparing departure arrangements. Yet something had shifted in their interaction pattern, mutual recognition established beyond tactical coordination or philosophical alignment. As Rias organized transportation back to her research facility where strategy development would continue, Medusa found herself considering implications of these developing connections across dimensional boundaries. The ritual had demonstrated how representatives from different realities could combine essences toward shared preservation. Perhaps relationships forming between those representatives represented equally significant dimension-transcending development. The mountain shrine receded behind them as they departed through devil teleportation magic, its ancient boundary seals temporarily stabilized through their combined efforts. Yet the broader convergence crisis continued progressing throughout multiple realities, with the Holy Grail's dimensional piercing function remaining primary catalyst requiring neutralization. Their unusual alliance had achieved important victory protecting regional stability, but substantially greater challenges awaited before dimensional security could be permanently established. Whatever philosophical positions various factions maintained regarding artificial separation versus natural unification, current convergence progression threatened catastrophic collapse rather than controlled transcendence. As the teleportation magic surrounded them with crimson light, Medusa's final observation encompassed both immediate tactical situation and broader existential considerations. Boundaries sometimes required maintenance rather than elimination. Why? Connections across those boundaries might represent evolution rather than violation, complexity rather than contradiction. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.